Good evening, it's now 7 p.m. and I'd like to start the meeting of Health, Wellbeing, Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I'd like to remind everyone present that this meeting is being recorded. Item 1, apologies for absence. I've received apologies from Kim James, Councillor Arnold, Les Billingham, also Councillor Fish will be joining us on Teams, and Councillor Salmons is now online as well. Thank you for that. Okay, yeah.
Sorry, could I just clarify that that's Councillor Deb Arnold who's given apologies?
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah.
The portfolio holder who's supposed to be presenting her portfolio holder report tonight. Yeah,
that is correct. That there is a, as you know, informal cabinet tonight that she's attending.
Will that therefore mean that she comes to the next?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And will that paper now move to that, or?
That paper will now move to that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay, item 2, minutes. I move the minutes for the Health, Wellbeing, Overview and Scrutiny Committee held on the 3rd November 2022 to be approved and recorded as a correct record. Does any members have any comments on the minutes? No, thank you, and I'd like to pass my thanks to Jenny Shade for the work that she's done on the minutes for me to make sure they were accurate. Okay, item 3, urgent items of business. I've not agreed to any urgent items of business. Does anyone wish to raise any points on any briefing notes? I don't think we've been sent any briefing notes at this moment. Declarations of interest. Does anyone wish to declare any declarations of interest? No, I will declare that on the item 6, which is e-put, I'm currently Thurrock Council's governor for e-put, as rep on there. It shouldn't really come into play. I mean, I will raise my questions, but I'm sure the Vice Chair will be happy if you wish for him to lead that point or not. So be down to yourselves. Item 5. Items raised by Health Watch. As you know, Kim James has given apologies, so we'll be moving on to item 6, which is the e-put presentation. Can I ask Paul Scott, Alex Green and Rita to present the item, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'm Paul Scott, I'm Chief Executive of Essex Partnership Trust, and it's a real pleasure to be here today. I'm joined by Alex Green, our Chief Operating Officer, and I think you know Rita, who one of our wonderful partnership directors. So hopefully you've got the pack in front of you. I was just going to not eat too much time because I think it'd be good to have the conversation. So I'm just going to do a brief introduction and context setting, hand over to Alex, who'll talk about what we've done, and then Rita will thread that through to what that means to Thurrock patients. So I've been in post alongside Alex now for about 2 years, and we've really focused on responding to historical issues that I'm sure you'll be familiar with, and the pandemic. We're also very focused on resetting the organisation so we can deal with the major challenges that we're facing, the risks that we're facing. And then once we've got that more established, we're in a place where we can rethink how we deliver services, and I think Thurrock is the vanguard for that, actually. I guess I'll just quickly run through the first 2 sections of the slide pack, and just to remind colleagues of the historical issues we're facing, both the Health and Safety Executive Prosecution and also the independent inquiry that's taking place. We've responded to that by making sure that we've refocused the organisation onto safety, and we've launched within 4 months of me starting, we'd launched a Safety First, Safety Always strategy, which reported for the first time last year and will report in the spring of this year about progress, trying to create a culture of openness, and we had quite a lot to do in the pandemic, not only responding in terms of staff, but also a major player in delivering vaccines to the population and to our staff, and we delivered 1.5 million vaccines over the period. Our major risks is staffing and the increased demand for mental health services. Those 2 things coming together do make things very tricky for us, and we'll be able to talk through what we're trying to do about that. Part of the reset was to articulate what we were trying to do in terms of our vision, purpose and strategic objectives, and we consulted very widely on that across the whole of Thurrock, Southend and Essex, and have aligned our strategic objectives with other organisations in the wider health and care system. You can see those there. They're ambitious. They set a vision that we want to be a leading organisation. I think that's what we were told people want from us. And I think that's good because it helps us think through some of the challenges we're facing day to day and think beyond that and become very ambitious. We've got objectives that pick up making sure we're safe and effective, that our people are valued and supported to be the best they can be, but also to make sure that we're very, very good partners to all the organisations we work with in the wider community, and to find a way of contributing to a community that thrives. We know that poor healthcare comes from good healthcare, comes from employment, housing, and education, and we want to be able to contribute to that as a major employer, but also a major influencer in the system. So we've made some progress on our strategic objectives. We will be publishing a strategic plan at the board next week, so we'll get a better idea of what we're trying to achieve, but we've been motoring ahead on some things. And just to draw out a major round of investment in both our community mental health teams, but also our ward safety, and we've made some really big differences to the environment in our wards, but also the safety on our wards. So £20 million in each of those is a big investment and a big move from us. We've really trying to address the staffing challenges we face. So we've got a big programme of local and national recruitment. We're competing against a scarce resource there for qualified clinicians. And so we've also embarked on a overseas recruitment process for mental health nurses. We've been very successful and had one of the biggest tranches in the country arriving this year. But that won't be enough either. So we're rethinking what we're going to do on our wards and what we can do to improve the skill mix and the type of people we have in our wards to support patients, so that there's two things. We've got better therapeutic outcomes for our patients, but also the establishment we put in place is recruitable. And that's the work we've got ongoing right now, and hopefully that will come to fruition very shortly. I won't dwell anymore because I don't want to eat too much time, but hopefully you can see the other progress we've made, and I'll hand over to Alex, who'll be able to talk through other things we're doing and done.
Thank you. So I'm Alex Green, I'm the Chief Operating I'm Alex Green, I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the Trust. I'm going to focus on the improvements that we're making, the response specifically to the Channel 4 dispatches programme, how we've worked with system partners to provide system oversight and assurance. Paul's covered a lot about the strategic future of EPUT, but then I'm going to hand over to Rita to talk about what that means specifically for Thurrock residents. Paul's mentioned the Safety First, Safety Always strategy launched in 2021. That's got 7 key themes: leadership, culture, continuous learning, the well-being of our staff, innovation, enhancing our environments, and governance and information. I'm really proud of our new care unit, our target operating model. Rita is part of that care unit model. We've completely revised our operational structure, but really importantly, we've provided leads in that structure to focus specifically on quality and safety, and we've appointed 5 medical directors to work directly with our operational leadership. That is new, it's evolving, but it is already making really good progress. And we've got a new patient experience team, so we really want to focus on bringing the voice of people with lived experience so we can learn from that. And we've recently recruited a number of safety champions who are all people with lived experience. Just to give you some flavour of recent improvements we've made, our absconsion rate has reduced significantly by over 60% in 2021. Our prone restraints have decreased significantly. We've had an 85% reduction in prone restraints. That's part of our First Safety Always strategy, and we've invested £20 million to improve our environments, specifically focusing on fixed ligature. We've got a 4-point action plan around ligature risk reduction. I chair that ligature risk reduction group on behalf of the Trust, and I provide quarterly reports to our Trust board. It focuses on governance, It focuses on our environment, as I've already said, our workforce and training. So it's not just about making environmental improvements, it's making sure we've got staff that are fit for purpose, and we're working hard on reducing self-harming behaviours. I've talked already about the investment that we've made, but importantly, we've got a really robust programme of ligature inspection on our wards. So all of our wards have a comprehensive inspection, and we take action to reduce any new risks that are raised. Excuse me. I'll move on then specifically to the actions that we undertook in response to the Channel 4 dispatches programme, and I want to assure this committee that the safety and care of our patients is our absolute priority. We took immediate actions to safeguard patients on Willow and Gallywood ward. They were the two wards identified in the programme. We clinically reviewed all of those patients on the ward. We undertook staffing reviews, and we increased our senior presence. I was part of that as well. And we understand how distressing that can be for patients, for families and carers, and for staff as well. We commissioned a full internal inquiry into that, and again, for assurance, we have taken specific conduct action with staff where it's appropriate to do so. And over the 3-month period which covered the undercover reporting, we were caring for residents from the Essex area, from Thurrock and from Southend. We've got enhanced management and oversight and on-site presence. So an example of that is we've recruited site coordinators over a 24-hour period. They undertake spot checks on all of our wards, and we've increased our matron establishment as well. We've undertaken, we've put in place a standalone process as well for patients, families and carers and anybody impacted by the programme. Excuse me. Reach into my bag for some water, apologies. Yeah, some water would be great, thank you. Paul's talked already about some of the recruitment challenges we face, and we're working hard to address that. We've recruited 100 new healthcare assistants, but importantly, we're trying to switch from high usage on bank and agency staff to having more permanent staff that understand the purpose of our business. We've had over 1,000 new starters, and we've moved 150 bank and agency staff to permanent roles within the Trust. Thank you. We've been as proactive as we can in the space of oversight and assurance, and we called for a rapid quality review with our partners. We informed our regulators straight away. Anthony McKeever, who is the CEO for Mid and South Essex, chaired a forum in December. We invited all of our partners to that. It was chaired on behalf of Greater Essex, so Herts and West Essex, Mid and South Essex, and North East Essex as well. That's part of national guidance, and we had representatives from all partners. Our action plans and our assurances will continue to be overseen by that group, and we've put a weekly and monthly process in place to do that. And I think really importantly, along with the care unit structure we've put in place, we're leveraging our internal governance to make sure that we're safe. So we have a monthly accountability meeting. Rita, you attend that, don't you? We have one for our inpatient services as well, and that has a direct line to executives. So there's an escalation to the executive team on any key risks and issues we need to help unblock. I think, Paul, you've already covered the strategic plan, but I think it's important to say that this plan has been developed from a grassroots level. It's been developed in engagement with our staff, with our patients and families, and that's really, really important. We want to focus on care at home for people, or care close to home if that's not possible. And we want to focus on prevention and early intervention. But where people do need 24-hour care in our inpatient units, we want to make that as easy as possible. We want to make access as easy as possible. I don't think I have to remind us that the demand for mental health services has grown significantly. That's as a result of the pandemic, but it's a result of public awareness, I think, as well. And to deal with some of that demand, we are working hard to implement an emergency department that is solely focused on mental health. That will be at Basildon Hospital, and it will be implemented in March of this year, so it's very, very soon. And our safety strategy is coming to board in March, as Paul said. I'm going to hand over to Rita, though, because I think we want to know what this means for Thurrock, don't we? And I think Rita will really be able to bring that alive for you.
Thank you. So, there we go. Remembered, nearly. Okay, so lovely to meet you all this evening. I'm Rita Takaria, and quite rightly, I do have a joint appointment across Thurrock Local Authority, EPUT and NELFT. I am the Director at Place for Thurrock, so the majority of health and care services are under my leadership, and I work in partnership with other leaders locally, but also across the MSC. So I'm going to break my update into two parts. Firstly, in terms of the delivery, so the operational aspects. So here we have a huge opportunity in terms of leadership, visibility, and having that real detail around governance, quality, performance, and day-to-day operational issues. So I'm based in Thurrock all week long. I'm based at Grays Hall, and I make my way through across all our sites across Thurrock. A lot of our teams, fortunately, are actually integrated already. So we've actually got a huge opportunity to further develop that. My history is back in Thurrock from 2014. I left in 2020 and came back, and that says something. So I went from central London and I came back to Thurrock specifically. And that was to move forward with our Better Care Together strategies. But most importantly, going back to the leadership visibility, so we have what we call a triumvirate leadership. So I meet regularly with the Deputy Medical Director, Fina Sebastian, together with Kerry McKay, who is our Deputy Director for Quality and Quality, Nurse Leader. We meet regularly through the month. They are visible down at Grays Hall and our other sites at Thurrock Community Hospital. This is our opportunity for not only obviously an informal catch-up, but to look at the day-to-day business, both from a quality, performance and leadership and culture perspective. Culture is a big part of our conversation. That also fits in with our Better Care Together strategy as well. In addition to that, you have an opportunity here now, with me being local, that we've got an opportunity where we're looking at operational processes as well. And that's really talking about integrated working across health and care. So, for example, we're reviewing our Section 117 processes. So, again, this is about actually seeing opportunities where we can review cases sooner, faster, with that medical, nursing and social care review, which potentially allows for significant changes for residents, but also has sort of efficiencies attached to that as well. We're looking at a number of other processes locally that would work for Thurrock. And that's where, obviously, we have the permissions of subsidiarity playing in with making sure that it also fits the governance processes across all our organisations as well. And then if I go back to, at a strategic level, so we work hand in glove together, both at a triumvirate level, local level, but then actually at a strategic level, we are able to progress on the Better Care Together Thurrock strategy. Key developments to date have been about what Alex spoke about, early intervention and prevention. So there are obviously people there's a significant amount of challenge and support and scrutiny on our inpatient wards, but actually a lot of my focus is out in the community, getting to people early and supporting that prevention across health and care. So we are rolling out our enablers, which are outlined in our Better Care Together strategy, which is human learning system principles. And we've already started to work around human learning system experiments around housing, homelessness, substance misuse and abuse, and people experiencing mental health crises, because we see that as a key area we could have significant gains, because people don't land in these positions with just one issue. It's a multitude of issues, and we've got an opportunity to get in early and to reduce those thresholds, remove thresholds, and actually look after the person as a whole, and get in early so they're not in those difficult positions. We're also developing and moving forward, having actually gained population inequalities funding together with Joe around moving forward with a therapeutic approach, which Ian Wake is particularly passionate about, as is Paul and Alex, called Open Dialogue, which is about working with people experiencing a mental health crisis, particularly psychotic episode, to actually work with them early through conversation, which has been shown to show evidence around reduction in medication and inpatient stays. So these are key areas that we're developing locally, but most importantly, we're able to have that visibility and local oversight both on data, culture and quality issues. Thank you.
So just to wrap up, and hopefully you've heard that we've got progress going on response, resetting and rethinking, and I think where Rita was talking there is a really exciting way of looking at how we deliver health and care across local areas. So we really recognise the need to change. We've made good strides on that, but there's a lot more to do. We'll continue to be accountable, we'll continue to be available to Thurrock HOSC, but we're also making sure we're available across a wide range of stakeholders. We counted we had 21 organisations that will hold us to account, and that's where that rapid quality review was quite helpful for us, because we can say things once, but very happy to come to Thurrock HOSC. And you can see in the pack that we've got a number of milestones over the next quarter where we'll be able to update progress publicly.
Okay, does anyone want to go first for questions?
I've got a couple.
Yeah, Councillor Polly first.
Thank you, Chair. My questions to Alex Green. Thank you for being here this evening, and thank you for the report. I noticed when we was speaking about safety first and focusing on some of our successes, we were keen to mention the high percentage rates on absconsions, improvements and the primary restraints. But the fixed ligature, we mentioned the investment, but there's a 32% reduction. I mean, surely our aim's 100% reduction in that rather, and there's no, I mean, a fixed ligature is a life, isn't it? So I've got nothing to compare it from. We're saying reduction in fixed ligature incidents in 21 to 22 compared to previous year, but I have no idea how many people that is involving. Thank you.
Thank you for that, and it's a really good question, and we can provide more specific data if that would be helpful. We've got an extensive programme of work in place across all of our inpatient environments, and being ligature free is really difficult with an environment that changes all of the time, and that's why the focus has been absolutely on reducing fixed point ligature and incidents resulting from that, but more importantly reducing the risk of ligature altogether and therefore self-harming behaviour, so trying to create much more therapeutic environments. Paul mentioned time to care. We want our clinical and our professional staff to be patient-facing all of the time, to be engaging in conversations and to de-escalate situations before they get to the point where people want to harm themselves. But as I say, it is a programme of work that we are progressing at the moment, and it continues all of the time. I can tell you we are within the national benchmark for fixed ligature, so if we compare ourselves to other providers, and we provide that data on a monthly basis, we are doing reasonably well. But if you would like some more detailed data, then we can provide that from our performance reports.
I think I would, Chair, please. What we don't want is reporting well and performing badly. There's a lot of reports, there's a lot of statistics, but what that is delivering. I mean, the reduction in the primary restraints as well, is that increased knowledge around ABD. We're seeing that, and that needs to be shared with partners, because such as our uniformed services, because that's another area of concern that I don't think people necessarily identify the acute behavioural disorders to be as acute as they are.
Can I come back in, because I'm really glad you raised restrictive practice, and it's not just about prone restraint, it's about any restraint, because we work from the premise that no restraint is a good restraint. You know, we don't want any restraints, and that's why that therapeutic time with patients is so important. We know that prone restraint is really bad for people, it's harmful for people, so we've worked really hard on reducing the number of prone restraints and done incredibly well. In fact, we've led some national programmes of work around that. But again, within our performance report, and we can provide that data to you, we've got some very specific data around different types of restraint.
Councillor Povkelly.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Chair, sorry, and thank you for the report and presentation. I've got a couple of questions, but I just wanted to follow up on Councillor Polly's question about it's useful to know that the fixed ligature rate is within the national benchmark. Is that the same for absconsions and prone restraint?
I would need to check specifically on, but we monitor it month by month as well. Just to say, the absconsions will include people who've gone on leave and returned late after a specific time. So it is a very, very mixed bag in there. We've termed it generally, but it includes a number of different types of absconsions from wards, how we classify that. But again, we can provide that data to you.
Thank you, that'd be really helpful. And my other question relates to the response to the Channel 4 dispatches programme, which was obviously incredibly unsettling. That there's a sort of line, and you mentioned it, about where this investigation has identified potential misconduct with instigated our conduct procedures. I suppose what the people of Thurrock probably really want to know is, have people identified within the programme, have they actually been sacked, or are they still working within our mental health service, and what are the kind of numbers are we talking in terms of as a percentage of your staff, I guess, are under investigation?
Thank you. So it was a small number of staff. It was 2 wards specifically, as you know, and we acted on the information that we had to hand. I can tell you that staff have left the organisation. I can't be specific about that because staff could be identifiable. But importantly, everybody identified was precluded at the point of knowledge. So some of those investigations are still going on, but they were precluded from working within that environment. So we took action straight away to manage that.
So sorry, just to come back on that, so nobody who's currently under investigation is still working for you, is currently looking after patients, let's put it that way.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, that was covered my questions. So, I will say that I appreciate the report. I appreciate the work that you do, and I appreciate how demoralising the programme must have been for you as a whole. Paul, I know the work that you've put into transforming the services. One of the things that I do have concern about is the use of social media by people that are on stayovers. They are filming from inside their unit, not always giving a true representation of what is going on. Is there any controls? So I know they've got a right to have devices, but I don't know if there's anything you can put in place, because they can be quite, I mean, they're live on TikTok and things like that. It can be quite hard to watch.
Yeah, I think that this is a national phenomenon, actually. This is not unique to Essex, and it is quite new, as you'd imagine, with the social media coming through. Our approach is to, every time someone reaches out like that on TikTok, it's because we haven't heard them. So our approach is not to try and stop them, it's to try and make sure we hear them and engage with people, our patients and their families much better. And I think there's been a shortfall of ours in the past, that we haven't really listened. If we listen to people and we can act, they'll feel less need, I think, to go to social media to express themselves.
Thank you. The other question I had was regarding being on watch, staff falling asleep while they're on watch. What new measures have been put in place to prevent that from happening?
So we immediately implemented a safety alert around sleeping that was led by our Director of Patient Safety. We've got very clear guidance for managers, but importantly, we want to prevent that happening in the first place, and so the well-being of staff becomes really important in that space. We want to make sure that people aren't undertaking observations for too long, because, you know, you can imagine if you're sitting with a patient, but we want to focus on engagement rather than just observation. It is about the therapeutic engagement with that patient. It's about the conversations. We want to move from it being very task-based to it being an activity that's undertaken with patients. Now, it's very difficult to eradicate altogether. So we've also put in place, I think I mentioned the site buddies earlier on, who are undertaking spot checks. So they will be walking the wards to ensure that people are doing what we expect them to do at the right time. If it does happen, we've got very clear guidance and very clear processes in place to manage that. And again, preclusion is one of the means which we use to make sure that people then aren't looking after patients if we have concerns about them sleeping.
Thank you. I mean, the other thing was since the pandemic, we've had an increase usage of the centres. Are we still getting the reoccurring visitors, the repeat people coming in, and how is that managed with the increase? I mean, it must be. You said about you're recruiting more staff now, but the site is still only the same size. How does that work?
So, again, we're trying to focus on shorter lengths of stay, because being in hospital for long periods of time generally is not good for people. That's why the work that we do with Rita on things like Section 117 becomes so important, the aftercare of people and actually preventing that readmission to hospital. One of the things that I think Paul and I and Rita are really proud of is the work that we're undertaking for people with personality disorder and complex needs. We know it's not good for them to be in hospital, but often people with complex needs are the people who return to our services. We're making sure that they've got really proactive management plans in place, and again we focus on helping them at the right time, so early intervention, close to home. So what we want to get to a place of is that our lengths of stays are shorter, and people who frequently are admitted to our inpatient services have really good plans in place to prevent that admission. Sometimes it is necessary though. Models like the emergency department will give us more time to provide a really comprehensive multidisciplinary assessment. And what we hope is that that's better for patients primarily, because if we can, we'll get them home with the right sort of support. But that helps the system as well, and it helps some of the pressures in the system. So it's got to be better for patients. It's got to be better for staff, actually, because they're working in better environments and they're working as a team, and it's got to be better for our partners.
Thank you for that. Councillor Fish.
Thank you, Chair. It was mentioned earlier about the difficulties in recruiting the staff that you want to recruit. So what are the challenges there?
Hi, Councillor Fish. The challenges are that there aren't enough clinically qualified staff working in mental health across the country at the moment. So we're competing for a scarce resource with other mental health trusts and private sector providers as well. I think that's compounded a bit in Essex, although we haven't seen massive evidence of this by the historic publicity around the inquiry and the prosecution. We're very focused on making sure that when staff are working at EPUT, they are getting a very good experience, and we'll continue to invest in training and flexible working and other areas of wellbeing. We're continually trying to recruit nationally and locally, but our focus now has been on to go overseas for recruitment, but also to redesign our workforce so that we can draw on other skills from different professions and create the therapeutic environment that Alex has talked about earlier.
Thank you.
Councillor Polly.
Thank you. I've got two questions. One around staffing. I noticed the numbers regarding bank staff. As we all know, there is a national shortage in all disciplines, whether it's occupational therapy, our own amazing care workers that then support. But mental health, I feel, for decades has been the poor relative. It's not sexy, is it, mental health, and has been underfunded for many, many years. So, and yet it's something that touches all of our lives, whether it be an elderly relative with dementia or a young child with behavioural problems. So I think there's a lot of ignorance around mental health. That's my personal opinion. One of the things that I have a concern of is situations where we have bank staff, they're also working for agencies, yet that, unlike healthcare professionals that have got a registration number, it's very difficult to know whether they've just done a day shift on at Homerton and then come to you to do a bed sit. So I would think that's quite a challenge, and I'm wondering if you've got anything in place to try and monitor that, or whether you're very restricted on then encroaching on that individual's actual rights to an information, if I'm making sense.
It's a really difficult one, and we can put internal controls around that through something that we use called health roster to make sure that people get appropriate breaks. But it becomes more difficult when you're relying on agency staff as well, and that's why we've got a programme of work in place to try and reduce the number of bank and agency staff that we use. But a number of our bank staff already work for us, so that becomes easier. We have an internal bank, if you like, so people might work in the community, but actually they might want to gain experience on the wards as well, and that's fine, but health roster enables us to manage some of that. We do have a reliance on agency staff as well. As I said, that is far more difficult to monitor. What we want to do is make EPUT a great place to work, so those agency staff want to come and work with us. It's compounded, though, by the cost of living challenges, I think, that we have at the moment. So it's something we're continuing to watch and try and be more robust about.
I really appreciate that answer, Alex. I think that was very candid, and we do appreciate that. The other question was around we would all agree that that hospital instay isn't necessarily the right road to recovery, although if somebody's in a PICU, obviously they're more acutely unwell and need that intervention and that level of care. So do we know what sort of time? Well, I suppose every individual is different on their recovery, isn't it? So, but are we seeing improvements, or are we seeing longer stays in the PICUs before you step them down? Thank you.
So we've seen improvements in our PICU lengths of stays recently, which is really good. I think I've got a really good relationship with our executive medical director, and him and I meet with our consultants on a weekly basis. We're looking specifically at lengths of stay and trying to reduce them, but trying to reduce them where it's right to do so. And I think it's very dependent on individual care and treatment plans. So, you know, we've got benchmarks around length of stay, and as I say, we're doing well on PQ. If we bring our assessment units into that equation, actually we're very close to the national benchmark for lengths of stay generally. But we want lengths of stay to be personalised, if you like, so people are with us for the right length of time, but most importantly we get them home with the right care and support to prevent that readmission to hospital. But PQ is improving.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, I think we're seeing a real need for less intensive and long inpatient stays and more respite. So when somebody's in a crisis, the mental health emergency department, for example, would be a great example where we can just help people sort of re-stabilise a bit, and then with the additional support we've got in the community now and the work that Rita's doing, we'll be able to support them home. And we're trying to get into more partnerships with our voluntary sector partners as well, and there's a really good example of that with a sanctuary house. It's in Basildon at the moment. We'd hope to extend it where people can stay for a few days without any medical intervention.
And I think as well where we see great potential is with Rita in post. We can drive those improvements with our approved mental health practitioners as well around detention and section, so that we can make sure that somebody's management plan is understood and that decision is taken with all of the information to hand.
I think just adding to that, obviously, right from the very beginning, so we've now got primary care, mental health practitioners out in primary care. So in 4 of our sort of PCNs, we've got mental health practitioners out there. So they're really supporting with that very early intervention and prevention. We've then got the ability where we're working across our 4 localities. So what we're trying to do is skill up everybody within those localities, and actually we've got Gemma here, who's actually from our community nursing teams, but what we're trying to do is really work in those 4 areas. So you get to know each other really well, you get to know your community really well, so you can have those really good conversations about how people are, how they're getting on, whether it's about medication, whether it's about their care plan is the right care plan for them, whether they need a further review with our medical teams, the primary care practitioners, or actually we need to review our assets and what's around that person, which is actually is making things difficult, and what's changed for those people. That's why we're able to get in early, and where we've got that local leadership, where they can't resolve it, they then can bring it up to us at my level to say, right, where are we stuck? What's really interesting is often, I'm going to use Gemma here sitting in the background, because it will actually often be our community nurses that will bring a case to say we're really struggling, and actually it's that join up between mental health and community health to actually put in an escalation plan which actually works for that person. So what we're doing, we're at the beginning of that journey, so that clinicians on that front line are trying to do their very best, but things are getting more and more difficult and complex, but we want to manage it out in the community. The last place, but often absolutely the right place for some of our clients, is a ward stay, but we want the right people to go into those wards, but we want to carry on wrapping around people in the community. So we've got a lot of activity happening in those 4 localities, specific to each of those localities. And that's the strength we've got with the early intervention prevention work.
Thank you, and thank you for your questions, committee. It just seemed that we learned a lot from what you're saying by the questions that the committee was given. I just think if we could put it back on the work, put this on the work project or something. You have you back in, just generally for an update on stuff, because I just think, yeah, the conversations we've just had don't seem to happen in other sort of settings, that committees that we have or other topics we come up to. So the boots on the ground information you're giving us, and you know, I really appreciate you coming and giving us the report and being honest. I think you've taken what has happened on the chin and you've put the changes in place. Hopefully it's given the committee the reassurance that steps are being taken. And again, I really appreciate you all coming in. And Alex and Paul, you're both welcome to stay or to leave. So it's up to you. Unfortunately for Rita, we've got to keep her. So no, thank you for that.
I think we'd be more than happy to come back and update you. So thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, item 7, the Integrated Medical Centre update. Can I ask Tiffany Hemmings via MS Teams to present the item, please?
Hello, let me just share my screen. Hopefully it will stay on the same screen when I go to slide. No, it hasn't. 1 second. Let me change my screen that I'm sharing. New to a different screen. There we go. Okay, good evening and thank you very much for having me back. So, today I'm going to give you an update on the Integrated Medical and Wellbeing Centres. As stated here, I will give you a brief update on the GP Fellowship update, and I'd also like to tell you a bit about the Alternative Provider Medical Services Contract update, which are linked, what you would like to hear about that. So in terms of Corringham, as you're aware, it's now open, and we have agreed it's now at initial operating capability, IOC, and we're working towards transforming the services there to full operating capability. And that effectively is led by Rita and the Integrated Locality Board. We've had lessons identified workshops at Corringham, as well as one-to-one sessions, followed by a review, and this information will inform the subsequent sites as we open them to make sure that we can reduce the time, for example, between IOC and FOC, and manage to get those services integrated much closer to opening of the building rather than the time that it will take us at Corringham. We've reviewed the benefits of Corringham to drive what that full operating capability should look like, to make sure that we really do get the most out of what we have produced so far. And future projects will very much have concurrent transformation alongside the site development and opening. So as I said, it will be much closer to the opening date of the building than it has been for Corringham. In terms of Grays IMWC, I'm sure you'll be pleased to hear that the Thurrock Community Hospital site has now been officially selected as the Grays IMWC site. And fabulous news, the Community Diagnostic Centre, which you may hear referred to as the CDC, received formal funding approval last week. So that project has now been officially initiated. And the expected opening of that centre is early to mid 2024. That will be effectively phase 1 of the Integrated Medical and Wellbeing Centre at the Grays site, and will link into the other services provided from that site. It will for the first time bring new diagnostic capability into Thurrock that doesn't already exist. Currently, patients have to travel to Basildon for some of these diagnostic services. The Grays site plan for the IMWC has now been value engineered so that we've been able to bring the price down to something around 16 million. There are other costs around the closure of Orsett, so that's not the only cost to be able to close Orsett, but that does now bring the price to a more realistic level. We haven't yet got the funding for that, but we are beginning those discussions as we speak to progress through the ICB with our partners to identify where that funding should come from so that we can move forward with a plan to have a site at the Thurrock Community Hospital for an IMWC. So I think you'll agree that we're making progress there. The plan as it currently stands is looking like we'll have sequential works in order to make the money work. We don't have enough money to do everything in 1 year. We don't have enough capital allowance to do everything in 1 year. But what we can do is do things a little bit more gradually, potentially starting in financial year 23-24. So it would be sequential building, allowing services to open as they move across from Orset to the Grays IMWC. And the very first service that we currently envisage moving, this could change, but currently we envisage having an urgent care treatment centre opening in the winter of 24-25 with other services following on. We currently have a minor injuries unit at Orset Hospital, so this is a significant upgrade in Thurrock and makes a really big difference to the people of Thurrock from 24-25. In terms of the affordability constraints that I spoke to you about last time, the Purfleet-on-Thames and Tilbury and Chadwell business cases are still with NHSE, and the main issue appears to be the capital departmental expenditure limits, otherwise known as CDEL. This has become a national issue. It's related to new rules around IFRS 16, which I'm sure you're aware about, and we've heard nothing further so far, despite these being there for some time. So we're still waiting. We are having active conversations with NHSE, but there is nothing further to report at this time. So what we're doing in the background is starting contingency planning, that's about to start, with our stakeholders to have a look at how we could still deliver better care together Thurrock benefits should the business cases be rejected by NHSE. I don't want to be wasting this time while we're waiting if they come back and reject it. I'd rather have an idea of what we do instead if we must. In terms of Orset Hospital, that closure is now dependent primarily on the funding of Grays IMWC, which I've already spoken about, and also the NHSE business cases for Tilbury and Purfleet. And as you know, the Purfleet business case was submitted 10 months ago. So originally we'd expected to wait 3 to 4 months. We're still waiting 10 months later with no indication of when that might be completed. So I have to tell you today that Orset Hospital is unlikely to close in 2025. However, the current plan is that closure would be sequential so that we can move services away from the site and into the community locations in Thurrock, such as opening a UTC in the Grays site from winter 24-25, which would be a significant improvement to the current scheme. So I'd like to just now move on and tell you briefly about the GP Fellowship Scheme, which I'm sure you're anxious to hear about. So our first candidate has been appointed and is due to start in the next month or so. We've got 2 candidate interviews in the coming weeks. There's 3 further applications and they're being matched with local practices. And there's 4 more applications expected following positive initial inquiries. So I'm sure you will agree that is absolutely fantastic news. We're about to go out and advertise this nationally, and we're tying it in with the timelines that GPs complete their training, because that doesn't happen every month of the year. They come out in batches. So we're trying to make sure that we tie in with those and capture these GPs that have finished or are finishing their training before they go elsewhere. And we're being quite successful so far. Now, the alternative provider medical services, as you're aware, MSc ICB, we manage 12 APMS contracts. They're fixed term compared to general medical service contracts, which most GP practices have, and those run in perpetuity. So 5 of these contracts, which are all Thurrock, are due to end in March and June of this year. And there's 1 short-term contract in Southend that also finishes in March, which is included within this procurement. So we went out to re-procurement of all these 6 contracts, to make sure we got the best primary care services for affected residents. The affected practices are shown here. So it's Oddfellows Health Centre and St Clement's Health Centre, Tilbury Health Centre, Thurrock Health Centre, Commonwealth Health Centre and Purfleet Care Centre. And then there's the one in Southend. So we did an options appraisal and we made sure we re-procured based on the right provider for the primary care needs of our patients. We used the General Medical Services specification, and really importantly for Thurrock, we removed the enhanced specifications on the current existing Thurrock APMS contracts, and that frees up £1.4 million per year to be spent on primary care for all Thurrock residents. That was effectively in there to persuade APMS providers to come and provide their services, but it didn't buy any extra services. That 1.4 million will now be able to be used to buy additional services across the whole of Thurrock. So that's a real win. So the submissions were scored in a very robust process and included the Health Watch partners. We focused on the sustainability of workforce, were they able to deliver collaborative solutions, continuity of care, and a reduction of local health inequalities. The contract will run for 15 years, so that offers considerable stability to local primary care and improved value for money. So the scoring was undertaken in November. There was a standstill period after notification, and that ended last week and no appeals have been lodged. So subject to the contract being agreed, all of those contracts are going to the same preferred provider, Spirit Healthcare, which is a national provider of primary care with very experienced clinical leadership. So we're now in a mobilisation phase, and our main priority is to seek an effective transition of services from the incumbent providers. So our key objectives now are supporting and retaining staff, ensuring the patients continue to access good quality services, and informing patients of the change, reassuring them that they will not need to re-register. So patients will as well be able to meet the new provider during mobilisation. So most people won't really notice any difference initially. They will continue to receive provision during and after mobilisation. There might be some staffing changes, but most practice staff are expected to transfer under 2P. And the new specification is for core primary care 8 till 6:30, Monday to Friday, extended access provision at a PCN level 6:30 till 8 p.m, Monday to Friday, and 9 to 5 on Saturdays. And this is a real change for Thurrock Health Centre patients who can currently book Saturday and Sunday morning appointments at their practice. But of course, MSC-wide out-of-hours services remain available on a Sunday, so they'll still be able to access Sunday appointments, just not at the Thurrock Health Centre. So there we go. I don't know if there are any questions. Let me stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Tiffany. That's quite an update. I think I'd best go through bit by bit. So, as we know, the Corridor IMC is open. One of the questions that I'm regularly asked is the heart cardiac treatment that is going to be taking place. When is that going to start being rolled out at that site?
So, as I understand it, that's a community service. So Rita would probably be better able to answer that question, actually.
So, Councillor Ralph, are you talking about the heart failure service? Yeah, okay, so they are part of our specialist services that are offering clinics from that site. So all services that were allocated to Corringham IMWC are now fully functional. So I'd be surprised if they're not running services there, because that's basically all our services that should be there are now running services, running operationally. So I can pick it up outside to understand where that information's come from, because they are all services that were allocated to the site have mobilised and have been operational from last year. But I can take that back and find out where that information's come from.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we've got residents coming forward and they can't get any heart stuff done there.
Okay, so obviously the heart failure service is a small service, but we are offering services from Corringham, but it may be that they're not able to get their appointments there. So let me find out what the challenge is, because they're definitely offering appointments from that site for local residents. So let me see what's gone on there.
Thank you. Again, the next one, sticking in order of the presentation, was Corringham, and that was the issue with staff parking and blocking roads locally, which I'm inundated with photographs of all the staff parking down Anderson's, and I can't remember what the other road is just opposite. Allen's Way.
Okay, so again, I will make sure there's a reminder to all staff. They're very clear about where we've got allocated parking for them. Obviously not on site, but we have identified spaces behind Morrison's as well. And they're very clear about those are the options in terms of parking there, and that hasn't been raised as an issue with me. But we'll make sure operationally, because we have a site user group that runs regularly, so we can pick it up at those sort of operational level meetings to just make sure. And if there is a challenge, because obviously there are times where our nurses do have to come into site to pick equipment up, etc. So in those scenarios, obviously they would have to come into our site itself, pick equipment up, do what photocopying or extra bits they need to do, or pick up kit. But then the expectation is that normally they would park off-site, but not on those roads that you've identified.
Thank you. I can see you're shaking your head behind. Could you put Rita's mic on so she can...
Yeah, so I'm the manager at Thurrock Centre for Independent Living, part of the coalition, a disability specialist and a former advocate. So we did the engagement groups before that site was built, and mentioned about the trouble that the old age pensioners using their bus passes, not enough parking spaces, disabled bays. We did all that engagement and it was just ignored. So, and obviously now we're having the trouble with people being able to park. I mean, out of that whole car park there is only 3 disabled bays, which apparently highways have said that for that area that's all that's required. But, you know, you can't tell me that there's only 3 disabled people all at the same time using those facilities, you know. And we've got a TLS base there as well, so
Yep.
we brought all this up,
Yep.
and it was all ignored. So I don't know why.
Yeah, you're correct. It was ignored by the NHS because it was brought up to HOSC loads of times that it was an inadequate site for parking, which Councillor Holloway, which was the previous chair, was also very keen on pointing out that there was complete failure of parking and availability at that site.
Absolutely. So acknowledging the history in terms of when the planning was done for that site, expectation around that site initially being a NELFT building only, and then moving to having a different requirement, and the travel plans, etc., were done at that very early stages. And in fact, I think Nav is on our meeting today as well. So we have tried to work around this several times. And you're absolutely right. There are only 3 spaces available for...
Even to go as far as the bus, the residents using the bus and their bus passes and things like that, and the fact that the nearest bus stop is across the main road anyway. You know, I mean, it's... Everyone's thought about themselves and not the residents.
So,
you know...
I'll take away 2 actions, because essentially we've also got to complete on that travel plan. So we have to actually have completed the travel plan audit within a specific period following the opening of the building, which allows us to do that further check and challenge to see if we've delivered against the plan. But secondly, as I said, we've got a site user group meeting, but again, your feedback would be really helpful, and I think what we'll do is arrange to meet up with you to actually look through that in a bit more detail and do some... What we did previously was we actually did some time and motion studies. So we actually just spent some time out within the community and just watched what was happening in terms of parking and what our nurses' requirements were as well, together with Thurrock Solutions, etc. So let's pick that up.
Okay.
Thank you, and thank you for your contribution there. Brilliant, thank you. Moving on to the Grays IMC and the Diagnostic Centre. So what I was concerned about in the way you spoke about this was that the Diagnostic Centre was going to be seeing the start of the Grays IMC. The Diagnostic Centre is a new thing. It's not the start of the IMC. The IMC or the IMWC is something that's been planned for a very long time. This Diagnostic Centre is a separate funding pot and basically is an add-on to the IMC. It's not a part of it. That was made very, very clear beforehand. Am I correct in thinking that?
Yes and no. So yes, it's a separate funding plot. Yes, it's an augmentation, but it will be fully integrated with the IMWC, inevitably, because of the way that we'll need to use things. So the Urgent Care Treatment Centre, for example, will rely entirely on the diagnostics in that building. Originally, if the CDC wasn't going to be there, then we would have had to put additional diagnostics capacity from ORSIT in there. But the ORSIT diagnostics are moving into the CDC, and there's extra things coming as well. So the answer is half and half.
Thank you for that. And then also going to go on to the, I guess, the affordability. It's now been a year, almost to the day, that Anthony McKeever sat here with the portfolio holder, said that all red tape will be cut and they're fully committed to delivering these projects. As you say, the 10 months the Perfleet business case has been out there. Can I ask, is NHS still dedicated and committed to these hubs, the medical hubs? And the reason why I'd like an answer on this is because Thurrock Council, we have shown commitment. We've knocked down a building that's cost us money because we were dedicated to these IMCs. We've got the next two agenda items after this are based on us having 4 IMCs. That means our staff have gone away and done these reports coming up on the belief that these IMCs were going to be there. We're going to have mental health teams based in these IMCs and other services that will be run out there. So I am looking for a statement of commitment from the NHS that you are committed to delivering the IMC buildings.
So MSc ICB has committed to the vision as specified by Thurrock local people over the past several years, which is to deliver the Integrated Medical and Wellbeing Centre programme. The ability to fund that is affected by national policy, including this CDEL issue. So we always had to take the business cases to NHSE to get them approved. We have no control over that element of the pathway. So we are doing our very best to engage with NHSE, but because this is now a national issue, CDEL is affecting lots and lots of places where there is not enough capital that we're allowed to spend on things to be able to progress so many different projects and programmes. So it's something that is very much sitting with NHS England at the moment. We will continue to press them to give us a response, but I can't promise that it will be a favourable response.
Ouch. Not going to be a favourable response. Do we read between lines and they're not going to happen? Is that what you're saying?
I don't know at the moment. We've got to wait for NHSE to agree these business cases. So we need them to come back to us and give us either a yes with caveats or a yes overall or a no. And then we need to move forward. I have no indication from them at all at the moment, apart from the fact it's been there a very long time.
Yeah, it has been a very long time. I will come to the rest of the committee in a second. I just want to ask the next question then. Also, Hospital. I did joke in that last meeting that I joked in the previous meeting it weren't going to be 2024, it's going to be 2025. Now it's not going to be 2025 moving forward. Are we on the verge of saying that Allsop Hospital is not going to close ever?
I think we're committed to closing Allsop Hospital. The cost of upgrading Allsop Hospital is prohibitive.
But you can commit to that.
No, we can't. That's the problem.
No, you can commit to shutting the hospital.
Yes.
But you
But we can't
commit to
shut
building
it.
IMCs.
We can't shut it until we've successfully moved the services into Thurrock for the benefit of the local people.
So if you... Now, again, you're playing with words, aren't you? So you're about the services, moving the services. You're not talking about the buildings. They're separate then. So you're saying that you don't have to shut Allsop Hospital, you don't have to build the IMCs, you just have to move the services within Thurrock, correct?
That is one way of reading it, yes. If we have the IMWCs, they can go into...
That is the way of reading it, isn't it?
If we have the IMWCs, they can go into the IMWCs, and that's still MSC ICB's plan. We don't yet have an answer that says no. So if we get an answer that says yes, then we'll be building them, won't we?
I'm going to go to Councillor Fish first, sorry.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, on your last point there, if you look at the portfolio holders report, she says herself there that there's a possibility that services may be provided in the community rather than in the buildings. That's her interpretation of the latest statements on the funding situation. I wanted to go down to something a bit more specific as well, which is you said that the urgent treatment centre was going to be an upgrade on the minor injuries unit. Can you tell me how that will be an upgrade?
So it has additional capability. It usually has more medical oversight, and it's effectively able to do more things. So some things that would previously have had to have gone to an accident and emergency department will be able to be seen in the UTC.
So it won't be a case of the same people that are now attending minor injuries will be attending the urgent treatment centre. There will be extra people attending that.
Yes. Yes, they'll be able to see a wider range of illnesses and injuries.
Hopefully they'll have extra capacity there to be able to cope with that extra level of people coming through.
So it will need to be right-sized in terms of the population, and there's a project group that have been formed to look at that. And we also need to bring an additional business case through NHS, MSC, ICB for the resource cost of the difference between the minor injuries unit and the UTC. And that action has commenced.
Thank you.
I was going to bring Rita in on that point.
It was just to help to understand the difference between what we currently have, which is a minor injuries unit, versus an urgent treatment centre. So actually what we have the capability to do is manage minor illnesses out in the community together with minor injuries. Thurrock residents have seen this at times where we've had some winter monies available to us, so we've actually brought in medical staff to support us in minor injuries units, which then does, as Tiffany has outlined, take people away for having to go up to Basildon, and they can be managed more locally. So the capabilities of a UTC is greater, and it manages both minor illnesses, minor injuries, and sort of all-consuming, and has a bigger skill set of individuals.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tiffany, for the presentation. I do have quite a few questions, but I do just want to start by following on from Councillor Ralph's point about that the language has shifted on this substantially. We are seeing a shift in the idea from, no, you will have 4 integrated medical centres, 4 buildings specifically designed for this purpose, to replace Allsop Hospital. That language has now shifted to, well, yeah, you know, we'll get around to putting the services somewhere in Thurrock at some point. Now, that is a fundamental betrayal of the people of Thurrock, because we were told repeatedly, loudly and consistently that Orsett Hospital would only close once there were 4 integrated medical centres built and opened. That is what the people of Thurrock were promised in exchange for losing our hospital. Now, residents at the time said, actually, we'd rather hang on to the hospital because we don't trust you to deliver the 4 centres, but they were assured that that would be what would happen. And it is absolutely scandalous that there is anybody trying to back away from that commitment, because that was what was signed up for, that was what was promised, and that is what needs to be delivered before Orsett's doors close. And anything else is a betrayal of the people of Thurrock. We, for too long, have been left out, not given what we need in terms of healthcare. And to be quite frank, Orsett is the last thing we've got. And if we're not actually, if the IMCs aren't actually delivered, all 4 of them, in the way they were promised, then that just represents a shocking betrayal of the people of Thurrock. And I just would reiterate that the language being used in order to get some wriggle room on this is disgraceful. But my question, which links on to this, my specific question, is about this idea of contingency planning that has been started around Purfleet and Tilbury. Am I right in thinking, based on what you've said, Tiffany, that the contingency planning isn't, oh, well, we've had the business case rejected, so we better come up with a different business case? Or is it, well, if this business case gets rejected, at that point you're going to say, do you know what, we're not going to do the buildings?
I don't know yet, because it's only just starting. So effectively what we're going to do is look at the different options that may come back in terms of agreement, but with caveats, or that we're told that we can't build it. We then need to look at, well, what could we do slightly different that might meet the different objectives that we're given. So we're kind of having to second guess what NHSE might come back with and think about which direction might we go for that. So because we've got no direction at the moment, we're effectively starting from a blank sheet of a whole pile of different scenarios. So it will be to make sure that we can deliver the services as envisioned, but how would we do that if we can't have an IMWC, etc., or if we have a smaller IMWC, for example? So I think there will be a series of different options that we will consider and make sure that we've got contingency plans if that kind of answer comes back. If the answer comes back that we can have the IMWC as currently planned, then that would be fantastic. We're just making sure that we don't waste time if the answer comes back, you can't have that, this is your constraint.
Okay, so essentially you're reviewing the options on that at the moment. I would just like, and I have mentioned this before, but we do seem to be in a really odd situation where we've ended up with a functioning IMWC in the most, in the area of the borough that actually has the best outcomes, that has the best ratio of doctoring. Not perfect, no, not brilliant, but still the best in the borough. We're now talking about Purfleet, South Ockington and Averley, Chadwell and Tilbury, which have the highest, let's not mince words, they have the highest rates of things like comorbidity, COPD, very elderly populations compared to other parts of the borough. Those areas that crucially need these services are the ones that are going to be left out in the cold. And I, again, cannot get over the fact that we seem to have not gone about this in an evidence-led way at all in determining need. And now that the money's run out, it's like, oh, well, you can have something in we're going to have to patch something together for you. It's really frustrating that we're in this position. Can
I just come back on that one?
Please.
So as you're aware, the Corringham building was built first because it was already underway, and NALFT had already signed this as a building and joined it in as part of the programme. So that's why the Corringham building came first.
Okay, so So now we need to deliver on the buildings for Tilbury and Chadwell, because they're the community, for Tilbury, Chadwell, Purfleet, South Ockenden and Naveley, because they're the communities, they deserve it too and they need it. Right, so in terms of Grays, I'm a little bit concerned about the timelines here, because we're apparently setting up an urgent treatment centre in the winter of 24/25. Now, my maths might be off a bit, but I don't think that that's a very long time away. If it's taken 10 months, I think by my rough calculation, it's about 22 months away. So if it's taken 10 months and in fact, we're looking at 10-month wait at the moment for the Tilbury business case to have gone through, and it still actually hasn't been dealt with. Why are you so confident that Grays can be delivered in 22 months if we could be looking at a year to get the business case signed off?
You're correct, and I did caveat it that that's our best estimate currently. It's because we're looking at a phased approach to the Grays IMWC and doing things in successive years, which does make it slightly easier to move. It's all into refurbished buildings, which are already there, and again, that makes it slightly easier to achieve as well. It doesn't mean it will happen on this timeline. It depends on so many different factors. Initially the funding, then the business case, and also planning, of course. But because it's going into refurbished buildings that are already there, or buildings that are already there that will be refurbished, it is slightly easier to achieve than the two new builds of Purfleet and Tilbury.
I think this is the first we're hearing about it being refurbished buildings, and it does sort of bear the question, I think we were led to believe that there would be a new building on the site. It also does beg the question, what are we losing from Lang Lane in order to accommodate the refurbished IMC?
So we're not losing anything. These are buildings that are currently either unused or underutilised. So it's effectively bringing them back into full use and making sure that they can deliver health services from that site. One of the buildings that forms a considerable part of this was recently used as the vaccination centre.
Okay, so the Grays IMWC isn't going to be a purpose-built hub?
It will be purpose-built, but within the confines of existing buildings.
That isn't purpose-built. I think we can all agree that what we were promised was a purpose-built IMWC, but again, this project has fallen short of what was promised to be delivered.
I'll just come back in on that again. This goes back to the walk that never happened and the plans that were never given out. So we were given a walk and a tour. The ex-chair, Councillor Holloway, joined us on that, and we do have the plans. I actually have the plans at home of the new buildings that was to be done. But I guess those plans are not going to happen at all. There's not going to be no new buildings. Is the site at the back that's going to be taken up for the new diagnostic centre, is that going to be a new building, or is that going to be a refurbished building?
So the CDC is a brand new building that will be effectively adjacent to one of those current buildings that's already there.
Okay, does anyone else have any questions? Councillor Polly.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'm an appointed governor on the MSC Hospital Foundation Trust, and this afternoon we had a governor's meeting where the interim chief exec officer explained the reason why the Grays site had been chosen for the CDC is because of the complex health needs within Thurrock especially, and because of some of the demographic. I am a little bit confused why the CDC has got all the drive and the delivery behind it, where this IMC it changes on a monthly basis. One of the questions I was going to ask was, is the CDC funding part of the 16 million site plan that for the Grays IMC. I'm even more concerned that we've got an estimated 16 million to go into existing buildings. So that gives me a concern of what's going to cost 16 million to go into existing buildings. As regards the urgent treatment centres, that could be welcomed, but because everything else is in so much doubt, I don't know if we'll ever deliver that, if we'll ever see that. I think I'm going to come away from the INCs because I can only support everything that Councillor Poffrey has said. I know you want to come back to it as an item. There were some other things in Tiffany's presentation that, if you don't mind, to go to the GP fellowship scheme. In our minutes from the last meeting, again on page 7, we've got here that it was minuted that we asked how many of the 12 fellowship general practitioners of those were currently engaged, and we was told at that point that 6 of those were in post or going through the process and soon to be in the team. Here we have a report where we say 1 candidate is appointed, 2 candidates have been interviewed, 3 further applications have been received. So that makes, in my maths, the 6 that were referred to from the last report. So I'm a little bit concerned there. Again, what information is coming to us?
Can I come?
Yep.
Can I come in on that one? So we did have 6 lined up, and we had some withdrawals. That happens until they actually complete their training and start work. They can decide they don't want to come at any time. That has happened to us, which is why we're carrying on with our advertising the roles and selling it as much as we can to actually get these people in. But this is the situation that we're at now, much more detailed than I was able to give you last time in terms of that there were 6 in the pathway. We've now got 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 in the pathway, and we're looking for more. We've got 12 spots to be able to fill currently, and there's potential to be able to put on more in the subsequent year.
Again, so unless we're asking the questions, we're not being given the information. All the emphasis is on us to do the scrutiny rather than an overview on some of these reports. There was a second point in that same meeting where yourself, Chair, asked if the appointments were going to be physical or telephone appointments, and there was an undertaking that a report will come back to you. I don't know if you've received that information, so perhaps if we can request it again. The alternative provider medical services, I noticed the affected practices, and probably 3 of those are the worst performing practices within Thurrock. And when we're looking at their patient lists, all of them are in excess of 12,000 patients on each list. The report suggests that there'll be little to no change in staff, and that people will just be two paid over. If anything, there may be 1 or 2 reductions in staff. These are already underperforming GP services. If anything, we want to be enhancing and bringing more staff into there, not looking at, and especially if a contract's going to be for 15 years. Perhaps I've misunderstood the way that the report's been put across, but if we're
so the
saying
benefit...
that, no, can I just finish my question?
Yes.
Are we saying that those underperforming services are are going to continue to be underperforming? Thank you.
No, that's not the plan at all. So the benefit of bringing in Spirit Healthcare is that they're very good at leadership and leading these practices and making sure they put the right processes and procedures in place to get the best out of what they've got. And that's not what we've seen to date. So I would anticipate that you would see improved services from these APMS practices. They have been, as you rightly state, some of the worst performing across the patch. We're bringing in a new provider and we'll be working with that provider to make sure that we do seek to improve those services for our local people.
And again, these are out to tender, so we've got no timeline on that, Tiffany?
I think they start in April and July. I did give some timelines at the beginning when they were due to run out, so I'm not exactly sure which sites, but some contracts end in March and some contracts end in June of this year. So we're already working towards them coming in from April and July. And
the ICB determined that re-procurement of all 6 contracts was the best option. What performance indicators are we setting them? How are we monitoring that we will get an improvement of service with the same amount of GPs, with the same telephony systems, with the same staff that we have in place at the moment?
So I'd have to defer to the primary healthcare team, but I could get them to come back with an answer for you.
Please, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. If we can get that to happen, please, we can get that come back to us. Just quickly, Councillor Piccolo.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's not so much a question because most of the questions have been adequately covered. Perhaps the answers haven't been adequate, but the questions have been adequate. I think that I was really impressed when I first heard about the idea of 4 community hubs, you know, going back before there was even funding for them or whatever else it was. Really impressed. It was going to make it a lot easier for the residents of Thurrock to get treatment local to home. Great idea. And I've fully supported it. What a disappointment. I've gone completely the other way now. It's going to be a complete hodgepodge for the residents of Thurrock. We're going to get the leftovers. Well, not necessarily the leftovers. We've got one medical centre. Fortunately, it's very close to me and I've used it. And it's in the adjacent wall to me. But that's likely to be, from what I'm hearing here tonight and from my own sort of thoughts, is likely to be the only one of that style in Thurrock. The others, it appears, are going to be a hodgepodge of a bit of this building, a bit of that building, and what's that. And I think the only thing I want to say, I was really impressed with the idea. If it's going to really be good, we were probably going to be, you know, I could see us leading the south of Essex or the south of England in medical approach to bringing things more local to local people, and I'm absolutely disgusted now with what it could turn into. I only hope that somehow or other the people responsible can turn it round, because otherwise it would eventually lead to Thurrock being in a worse position than what we were in the first place. If it comes to it, Allsett Hospital may not be suitable, and I'm sure that the money from the sale of the land for housing was what's probably driving it forward. You're going to have to look at doing something with Allsett Hospital. If it means knocking it down and getting the developer to put a contribution to building something or using that money to build a centre somewhere else, or one of the medical centres somewhere else. Anyway, I've had my rant. I'd say I'm really disappointed with this, and I just thought I'd have to say. The only thing that does seem to be working well out of it is a fellowship scheme, and hopefully, hopefully, from the applications you're getting through, again, that could be another leader that we've implemented to, you know, maybe taken up elsewhere around, and I hope that that succeeds rather than the way the integrated medical centres appear that they're going to fail.
Thank you, Councillor. First of all, I just want to reassure the Vice Chair that it's just a coincidence that the medical centre is actually in my ward that's open. Before anyone starts anything.
Next to my ward.
Next to your ward. Yeah, I think the committee has really been open and honest with their feelings tonight. We are disappointed. I say it's a year ago, roughly today, that Anthony McKeever told us all red tape would be cut, everything was going to be pushed through, and all barriers are going to be dropped to get these over the line. So I'm very, very disappointed. I understand that our MP still has been told that the NHS is dedicated and committed to the buildings. That's the last I knew. That may have moved on. That may have changed. I'm going that, Tiffany, that you've got that. You are presenting the most up-to-date information to us today. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for the report, Tiffany. As you know, it's a standing item that we'll come back to on to the next HOS meeting. If I don't want to say, I can advise you to everyone get together and have a chat about it with the MPs and Anthony McKeever and the portfolio holder. You'll need to do something to try and work out what is going on. And maybe open up all hospitals to wards and give it a future if that's the way it's heading at the moment. Because I can't see it ever closing at this rate.
Chair, the member of the public wants to speak.
Just going to bring in, do you want to come to the thing, introduce yourself and then...
Again, so I'm Kelly, I'm from Thurrock Centre for Independent Living. I think really what you also need to do is include the public, because in my role, I only deal with the disabled people, the people that are on the receiving end of this. And you seem to be doing all these decisions, but not asking them the problems they're having, in their GP surgeries. We see these people every single day. You know, I mean, the amount of people that we see is unbelievable, especially over the last couple of years, with the troubles that they're having with their GP services in the hospital. I think it would be good if you brought, you know, you engaged with them a bit more and asked them what their problems were, rather than just making these decisions, making the decisions with the GPs and the staff, but not being funny. A lot of the problem are the staff. But I think it would be good, you know, going forward for you to have the residents in engagement groups, or, you know, just getting their feedback as well, rather than just excluding them, because I think that is what a lot of the problem is as well. You're just making your mind up without asking what the experiences are that they're going through. You know, I mean, these are people that are terminally ill, a few weeks to live, or people that have got, you know, long illnesses. But, yeah, I'm sorry, I just feel that they should be involved as well, really. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, that's quite a passionate plea. Thank you.
Can I come back on that one?
Yes, please.
I would say that wherever there's a change in service provision, so we're significantly changing a service, then we do consult with the public. And where we have a not considered significant change, but a change in the services that we are going to deliver, that we will engage with the public as well. So we always do seek to do that. And you can contact our communications team at any time if you've got any questions about services as they exist, so that we can hear your thoughts on it and make sure it is put through to the appropriate member of the ICB team.
Okay, thank you, and thank you, Tiffany, for your report. Okay, we're going to have to move on. Time is really getting on tonight. Item 5, self-care in the context of living with life-term conditions. A joint strategy needs assessment. Can I ask Jo Broadbent to present this item, please?
Thank you, Chair. I will just share my screen. Sorry, bear with me, I'm having an issue.
Actually, Joe, before you start, can I ask you a question already?
Yeah, sure.
This report is technically sort of like really out of date because it stopped before COVID. Just going by the author's note.
So this report was finished just over a year ago. So it was presented to the then Healthcare Partnership Board, I think back in December 21. We're bringing 3 reports to the HOSC committee today. They're all needs assessments, slightly different types of needs assessments. And the fact we're bringing 3 at once and some of them were completed some time ago is reflective of the fact that we've got a backlog of work that has been completed over recent years. It was delayed a little bit by COVID, and we've struggled to get the various reports through the various committees within a timely fashion. So this was actually completed about a year ago, as I say, and signed off by the Health and Care Partnership then. In terms of this particular report, I think that the data is, I think, largely from 1819, which is probably quite helpful in that it wasn't it's not data that has been distorted by the experience of COVID. So it's probably slightly more generalisable to the situation going forward post-COVID.
I understand that. I just think when we talk about the mental health side of it, obviously it doesn't show the true reflection of what happened with the pandemic with the increase of mental health. So I think we could have made outweigh on that side of it. But yes, I'm sorry, just continue your presentation, sorry.
Yeah, thanks. So there's a lot of evidence around self-care, and I think that will be built on based on the experience of people within the pandemic, because I think it was different then. This particular report chose to focus on 3 physical health conditions: diabetes, COPD and heart failure. And those conditions were chosen because they are more complex conditions, they require more complex care, they have a number of potential side effects, and are particularly amenable, I think, to improvements due to self-care. So although the principles in this report will apply more broadly, we focused on those particular conditions to pull out some lessons about self-care. The other thing to note about this particular report is, as I say, it was done for the Mid and South Essex ICS. It's the first needs assessment that the population health management team that works at the ICS level have done. So the data therein is all for the ICS. It's not just Thurrock level data. And that's kind of important because a lot of the levers for taking forward self-care are spread across different levels of the system. They're at locality level, they're at Thurrock borough level, but also at the ICS system level, and the recommendations that were made sort of hit all those 3 different levels. So self-care is defined in the report through the theory of self-care for chronic illness, and there are essentially 3 core elements that this theory identifies. The first being self-care maintenance, so maintaining good health through health promoting practices and positive health behaviours such as taking regular exercise, having a healthy diet, etc. The second area is self-care monitoring, self-observation of signs and symptoms, such as blood glucose monitoring for people with diabetes. And then third element is self-care management, so taking action in response to signs and symptoms when support is needed, so taking prescribed medication and seeking timely advice when illness flares up. And this is really important because a range of studies have shown that health risk behaviours, so how healthily we live, account for about 40% of a person's health status. And when you look at the influence of healthcare on an individual's health status, that's only about 10 to 20%, depending on the particular model that you look at. So it really does have a big impact on individuals' health. Self-care is important because it reduces the risk of developing long-term conditions in the first place. It prevents and delays deterioration of those conditions for people who already have a diagnosis, and it helps give individuals a feeling of control over their health and their health status, and the net effect of that is to promote healthier behaviours. It increases engagement with healthcare, so engaging in screening, going for regular checkups, for example, and also increases compliance with treatment. So it really does have an impact on how people's health and disease progresses. There's a lot of detail on this slide and it's quite small, but you'll recognise that these were taken from the report. And the key point of this slide is really to illustrate that there is a real impact based on the evidence that we can see in terms of outcomes as a result of improving self-care across the community, and also the financial impact on the system as a whole. So the blue and grey hexagons at the top just illustrate that due to a growing population, an ageing population, and the increasing prevalence of conditions, there will be more individuals with long-term conditions in the future if nothing else changes. And the orange hexagons show that for diabetes on the left, we're looking at projected increased cost of £4 million for hospital costs by 2030 if nothing else changes. And for COPD, which is on the right, that's over £17 million. So that's a huge amount of money. The green hexagons at the bottom are a model of, if we improve self-care based on the evidence base, then we can roughly halve some of these increases and reduce them substantially. So these can all be impacted by improving care at those three different levels of self-care, so healthy behaviours, maintenance, management and treatment. And we also saw similar magnitudes of impact for heart failure, although they're not actually shown on this slide here. Self-care alone won't achieve this, and this needs to be done as part of a holistic care programme across the system, and this committee will be aware of the Better Care Together Thurrock strategy, which builds on holistic care principles and tries to move away from a medical model, but self-care is very much a key part of that holistic care model. So there's a number of recommendations in the report, as you'll have seen, and I'm not going to go through them all now, but I've pulled out some here that are of particular importance for the Thurrock Alliance. As I said, a lot of the other recommendations really need to be implemented at the ICS level, and I'll just say something in a minute about how that will happen. But for Thurrock Alliance, some of the things we need to consider are about case finding and management. You'll remember at the last meeting I presented my annual report, which was around the management of CVD conditions in Thurrock, and actually that report supersedes some of the findings in this, but essentially comes to the same conclusions, that we need to focus on finding and diagnosing people with these conditions and getting them into high quality treatment and supporting them to self-care and manage their own conditions. We can enhance the provision of education about health conditions and specialist support for people with diagnosed conditions, and that's something that we can do through integrated care, through multidisciplinary teams, again, as we're moving towards through the Better Care Together Thurrock strategy. We should be shifting towards outcome-based targets rather than performance management, and again, taking that holistic view and working with individuals about what outcomes they want for their health is again at the core of the Better Care Together Thurrock strategy. One of the recommendations is about motivational interviewing and coaching techniques for staff in primary care, community care and also public health, and we're taking that forward at the moment through some funding, health inequalities funding that's in development. Other recommendations are around support groups for patients with the same condition and with multimorbidity in particular. Evidence suggests that group support can be helpful to individuals, as can improving CBT for people with long-term conditions to help them reduce anxiety and improve their quality of life. And again, these are all things we can build into that person-centred, holistic, Better Care Together Thurrock care model that we're working towards. There are also some recommendations in the report that focus on patients and how patients can support themselves to get the most out of the care that they do receive from the system. So recommendations about planning your appointment with a care provider in advance. So thinking about the questions you might want to ask, writing them down so you don't forget the things that you want to get out of the appointment. Keeping a symptom log or a diary can also be helpful in your interactions with your care provider. Being open to accessing online services. There are some really good apps through the NHS that can help people support their conditions, and those are really helpful, and we recommend that people with long-term conditions be open to using this variety of support that's out there, because they can be really quite helpful. So in terms of next steps, as I mentioned, we've made a successful bid to the Health Inequalities Fund from MSE to put in place that motivational interviewing training that I talked about, and that will be in place over the next few months. As part of the Better Care Together Thurrock executive group, there are a number of subgroups that are working on different elements of that strategy, and so we've set up a population health and health inequalities board, and that group will take forward recommendations around improving long-term conditions care, so that case finding, improving the quality of management, but we'll also bring in these recommendations from this JSNA about supporting people to self-care. And then finally, at the ICS level, the ICS went through a lot of changes in the summer, as you'll be aware, but one of the things that they did was improve the governance around prevention, inequalities and population health as a whole. So we've got the Population Health Improvement Board that's been set up, and that's got subgroups around personalisation of care, prevention and health inequalities. And the recommendations from this JSNA at the ICS level will now be taken forward through that personalisation of care group. So that's how this is all being taken forward, and I'll stop there. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you for that report. I'm going to be selfish and go first. So our role today is to comment and to note this report. I have literally gone through this in quite detail. It's a very detailed report. A lot of information was provided. So just going through the peer support programme, I think is such a great idea. I think it brings a lot of value to people with these conditions, to getting up into groups and to be able to speak to peers and meeting up as a group, even if it's virtually or whatever. I think has a great benefit, especially with the diabetes side of it all. Passing and sharing information, I think that's a real positive step. And on that side, I'm also surprised that cognitive behavioural therapy doesn't seem to have much of a positive impact to heart health. So I was looking at the report, that was on page, I think on either page 63 or 94 of your report. I don't know how it come out on there. Yeah, the evidence suggests CBT can improve mental health and the quality in life of patients, but I just feel there's no improvement of self-care behaviours. I just find that CBT is all about changing the way that you behave. So I don't, on that section there, it says that it's sort of improving mental health, but it's not changing the behaviour. But it's CBT. I just found it a little bit contradictory in what that was for. That was on page 94 on our report.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of the evidence around these interventions and the impact on behaviour, it's probably better to look more broadly across a range of conditions. So this trial that's mentioned here is only on 158 patients. That's not actually a lot of people in the grand scheme of things, and in terms of quantifying the impact, particularly around things like behaviours that are slightly more difficult to measure than a biological measure such as blood pressure. So I think that particular trial has shown some efficacy, but I think we can probably extrapolate from the broader body of evidence around the impact of CBT on long-term conditions for this particular patient group beyond that group of 158, I would suggest.
Yeah, thank you for that. I didn't know it was on such a small scale, to be truthful. I guess that would explain in quite a lot. On page 112, we've got developing queries into AGPs in finding the missing thousands from disease registers. Patients who are not registered. How long has that been going on? That's obviously, at the time, was through CCGs.
So if you remember the presentation I gave last time about my annual public health report that was looking back to 2016 to the report that Ian did then. So actually this is a strategy that was put in place at that time. And the annual report that I've done has shown that the rate of diagnosis of conditions such as blood pressure has increased over recent years, even during COVID. And it's increased in Thurrock, I think, because of a lot of the initiatives we put in place, whereas it hasn't increased in a lot of our neighbouring boroughs. So this has been going on for quite some time, but of course we've got a growing population, we've got an ageing population, and so the number of people with these conditions in the community is going up. So although we're increasing our diagnosis rate, we're sort of chasing an ever increasing target, as it were. But these initiatives do work, but we will never be there because there'll always be new people developing disease. So we need to keep on doing the case finding. So we're going to be developing a new case finding strategy as part of the Population Health and Inequalities group that I spoke about. And Emma Sanford in my team is working with GP leads at the moment to develop that particular strategy.
Yeah, thank you for that explanation. It's just like, you know they're there, but you can't find them sort of thing. It's that. And the other one was the money in the wrong places. I found that very, making sure that we put our money in the correct places going forward. Again, this is based on data from, 2018 to 2019. I'm guessing we've moved on from that stage now and we've looked in a different way.
I have to be honest and say, working in public health and taking us, promoting prevention and advocating for prevention, it's over a decade of working as a consultant in public health. It's a conversation that I've been having the whole time, because NHS services focus very much on the treatment of established conditions. There's obviously funding for diagnosis, and we've heard about the Community Diagnostic Centre today. But making that argument for shifting money to prevention is always quite difficult to do, because the benefits of prevention are quite long in the future. So you have to make quite a long-term economic argument. And in times when money is scarce, sometimes it's quite hard to make that shift, because you have to have double running of the treatment and the prevention at the same time. So it's quite a tricky nut to crack, to be honest. I am hopeful that with the ICS setting up the Population Health Improvement Board, we'll be able to take a view across the whole ICS system, so across the NHS and the public health services and other local authority services, and start to make that shift. The ICS has set up, you probably know, a number of stewardship groups to look at particular clinical pathways. So we're starting to work with the high impact clinical pathways, so cardiovascular disease in particular, to look at with them how they can move money upstream within that particular pathway. But it is something that is a constant challenge for us in public health, and it's a difficult one.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And even with the impacts of the pandemic, it probably changed the focus of where we can put our money during that time. My last thing, I just wanted to ask a question, and that was the Brain in Hand service that we use. Is that a free app, or is that something that they have to charge for?
I don't know. I would have to find out. I can find out. The Brain in Hand, is it?
Yeah, it's on. It's on actually the Appendix 2. Brain in Hand, mental health, digital, all areas, Thurrock Council. Brain in Hand is an app that gives access to detailed personalised support. I'm aware of it. It's a sort of way to organise your life and to help with relaxation and reduce anxiety. I just wonder if we're providing that as free, because I know there are some services that do charge for that. So if you just get back to me on that.
I'll have to find out, I'm afraid. I don't know.
That's fine. Thank you, Joe. Councillor Fish.
Thanks, Chair. Speaking to somebody who has a long-term condition, I hope that time management is included in in the services that you provide, because I can tell you, I get so many texts from my surgery saying, come in for this check, come in for that check, get referrals from hospital out of the blue for different checks as well as I'm getting older. So there's an awful lot to having a condition, and I think the self-care on its own, if it wasn't taken in a holistic way, it probably wouldn't work, because for a lot of people it wouldn't be realistic to do that. People already know, most people already know they shouldn't eat, they should eat junk food, they shouldn't smoke, etc. But, you know, with, as I say, with a holistic approach, I think this will work, and I definitely support it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This needs to be as part of a holistic, patient-centred approach. And going back to the Better Care Together Thurrock strategy that I mentioned, that ethos is absolutely at the heart of that. So, for example, my team have been working with the clinical teams. I hesitate to mention the IMCs again, but the clinical model, there's been clinical model work going on alongside the work around the buildings, and we've been looking very much at how to create multidisciplinary clinics. So, for example, yeah, you're not having to go to one appointment one day and one appointment for something else the next day. You're absolutely right. There's got to be a better way to organise this, which is more efficient and more patient-centred, so it doesn't take up so much of your time and actually makes better use of the resources in the NHS and other services. So we are endeavouring to move towards that, and the public health team have a local contract with GP practices, and we've revamped our contract for this year and next year to make that to incentivise that, building those holistic clinics and setting them up and targeting those at the people with multimorbidity who will benefit most from having that multi-pronged approach at one time. So yeah, you're absolutely right, and I completely agree with you that that is what is needed.
Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Fish, thank you for that. It's, you know, Joe, what you said there is that how much the medical buildings, the IMC buildings, are part of your future plans. And you know, with Rita sitting opposite me at the moment, I've seen when these centres do work, and they do work well. And you know, with the appointment times that Councillor Fish is going on about, it does flow better. And so you can just see how much it outweighs the negative things that we're going through at the moment. The IMCs are such a good thing.
Thank you, Councillor Ralph. So absolutely agree. And the point that, so Joe has presented you with some of the sort of opportunities around clinics and multi-morbidity clinics, where you're looking at someone who is presenting with a number of conditions, or actually has one condition but could be managed by, rather than going to multiple appointments, which was referenced, can be seen at that one time. So doing some of that modelling. The other opportunity, which we're also testing at Corringham, because that building is up and it's our first opportunity to test this, is actually exploring obesity and managing obesity differently. So we talked earlier about human learning system approach, which is something that we have committed to as part of our Better Care Together strategy, which is about looking at a human being as being part of a very complex system, and actually it's not linear. So you can't manage one issue, and it might not be the priority. And again, it was referenced. We all know we've got to eat well, exercise, etc., but that might not be the priority for an individual. So actually, through Corringham IMWC, what we'd like to do is test obesity and working around someone who is having challenges around weight management. And it actually, because at this particular building, we have both the health services, but also we have access to debt, we have access to housing, social care, emotional well-being as well, so we can actually explore. So for example, with human learning systems, obesity is identified as 106 odd variables that affect as to why someone might be obese, and so it's not just about exercise. So we are testing that as part of our work at Corringham IMWC.
Thank you, Rita. Councillor Polly.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a question for Joe Broadbent. I'm going to expose my ignorance here, so I do apologise. Thank you for the list of abbreviations, which is very helpful. I will commend that, and I'd like to see that more in other reports. STBs, the Sustainability Transformation Partnership, there's barely a page where STP doesn't get mentioned. STP figure was calculated by adding together. STP figure was calculated. So I don't. Could I have a bit of an explanation to what is Sustainability Transformation Partnership and why are they calculating figures? I don't quite understand that part of the report.
So this is, as Councillor Ralph noted at the start, this report was written about a year ago, and the NHS, the STP is what is now the integrated care system. So the NHS has undergone a reorganisation in the past year, one of its regular reorganisations, and so STP is essentially the partnership that includes the NHS and councils within Southend, Thurrock, Basildon, Brentwood, Castlepoint and Rochford, Mid-Essex, that make up what is now the integrated care system. So it's all the services within that geographical patch. They used to be called STPs, they're now called ICSs. The NHS likes a three-letter acronym.
Exactly, Jo, and the fact that we're reading a report that's already out of date because all of those, and as you said, there's references to CCGs that are no longer in place. But Rita also brought up another point about the obesity, because at least two of those conditions, heart failure and diabetes, especially type 2 and age-related diabetes, are often are a follow-on from obesity, and also keeping people's cholesterol levels checked is really important, because then you've got your cardiovascular diseases, and which can also lead on to other complications. One of the other things that I was hearing, though, was treatments, or perhaps a personal plan, personal-centred plans that I thought were already in place with the social prescribers. I thought that the social prescribers were, their role was pretty much what you explained, Rita.
Yeah, so the beginning of the journey is with the social prescribers, but actually it's much bigger than social prescribers. So they are supporting, they are working with us to sort of make sure, again, we were talking about assets, weren't we? What's available out in the community to support someone, an individual, manage their condition. But actually they alone can't manage all of this. This actually needs a whole system change and approach. So that's why we've embarked on this journey as part of Better Care Together. So we started with social prescribers. We've also got local area coordinators and others that can support within the community. But we actually need to look at it as a whole system, because what we're still ending up with is a lot of people ending up in A&E, back to their GP several times, still not in a position where they're able to manage their condition, or may be able to.
Just on that, absolutely. The amount of people that self-present or call for emergency services with long-term health conditions, and one of the things that I did welcome in this report, Jo, was for people to be rechecking their blood sugars, and that it seems if you speak to people with COPD, that they're told they've got COPD, they'll tell you they were given inhalers. They've never seen a respiratory nurse, which I doubt is actually the case. You ask them if they've got a spacer, it's in the drawer somewhere. They need support, don't they, until they get used to how to manage that condition, using the preventers rather than the Ventolin inhalers. But also on that side of things is when you've got that regular support and that you can then monitor those conditions. But for a diabetic to be diagnosed, given morphine, and then never check their blood sugars again, and just feel that they can continue with their lifestyle that's brought them to having the type 2 diabetes, is very unproductive and not fair on the patient, because you're just then going to lead them down to a path where they'll get more complex and debilitating illnesses such as the neuropathy and chronic conditions. So there's a lot to be celebrated in there, but I think some of it we're already doing. It's just about how successful we can be with it. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to take 1 second.
Sorry, Joe, we're just discussing standing orders. Just bear with us just 1 second.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion without notice to suspend the council procedure rule 111.1 to allow the meeting to continue beyond the 2.5 hour time limit. So I would say we'll go to 10 o'clock. I was going to shock Terry then, no, till 10 o'clock. Thank you.
I appreciate that, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Was there any other questions for Joe on this item?
No, it's been noticed before.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Joe. This is noted and commented on. And we're just going to reset for 5 minutes to just take a comfort break. Okay, thank you for this committee. As I say, we do take scrutiny serious, and even more so in the current climate. So thank you for allowing the extension of this. Okay, so item 9, I believe we're now on, which is the adult substance misuse needs assessment. Can I ask Philip Gregory via MS Teams to present this?
My screen.
Yes, we can. Thank you. And we also have a printout of your slides as well.
Excellent, great stuff. Okay, I'll crack on. I'm mindful of the time. So, we've recently published or finished the final draft of our needs assessment. It's sort of it was commissioned back in May, so we've sort of done this over the last 6 months, and really it's come about because we're aware that our current adult substance misuse service, which I'm sure most of you know is run by Inclusion Visions, that is going to end on March 31st, 2024. We recently extended that for a period of 1 year. We've done that to allow ourselves time to complete a recommissioning exercise, which will give us a really high quality, appropriate service for 24-25 onwards. So we've got the needs assessment to inform that commissioning cycle. And so for 23-24, we're going to have the service we have had in the past, but from 24-25 onwards, we'll have a new, refreshed, shiny new service based on the findings of this needs assessment. So this needs assessment is the robust evidence base for that recommissioning process. It's been to the Public Health Leadership Team for comment and approval, and it's also been to the Adult Housing and Health Directorate team for approval and comment and then approval. So it's been through a few stages. So hopefully tonight is its final stage before we can publish it. So the background to the assessment was we had 5 specific aims. The main one, as I've mentioned, was to inform that recommissioning process. We also wanted to identify gaps in local service provision for adult substance misuse, and really wanted to focus on where there are gaps with people who don't engage with the service at the moment. That's really important that we can try and reach the hard to reach individuals. We wanted to look at harm minimisation approaches. We wanted to look at the number of individuals with co-occurring conditions, so that's individuals with substance and alcohol misuse and mental illness at the same time, particularly complex cases. And we wanted to embrace the new sort of human learning systems co-design approach to services. So for 24-25, we're really going to embed that human learning systems approach into the contract. So the data gathering for the needs assessment, there was 5 different sources of information for us. So we did the standard data trawl exercise you would expect, taking quantitative data from NDTMS and from local providers. So we get our performance data from Inclusion Visions. We then complemented that with 16 interviews with professionals who all have a stake in substance misuse. So that included individuals from mental health, probation, youth offending service, trading standards, housing, etc. So there was a really comprehensive array of professionals who we consulted with. There was then also 47 questionnaires with service or people who use the service. We wanted to make sure we got that lived experience captured in this assessment. We also looked at national and local policy and strategic approaches. So we wanted to look what the national strategy was and what's the sort of direction of travel in terms of substance misuse. And then we looked at the evidence base. So a literature search was conducted to try and identify effective approaches to drug and alcohol misuse. And so if you've read the full needs assessment, incredible, because it's over 200 pages long, but I'm going to try and just capture a few of the key points. There is an executive summary which I could share with you, which will contain more points, but this is just a select few key findings. It's certainly not all of the key findings, but essentially what we found was that the opiate use in Thurrock is lower, the rates are lower than they are in England, and our crack cocaine use is broadly similar to the national average. Whilst they're similar or lower, that doesn't mean to say there isn't a significant number of people who are using those substances. So we have 493 people. estimated who are using opiates and 450 people using crack cocaine in Thurrock. So there is a significant population there that we should be working with. On the alcohol, is about 1,600 individuals with an alcohol dependency. These are estimates, and the proportion of people who abstain from drinking over 14 units of alcohol per week was significantly lower for Thurrock than in England, but still there is a significant number of people to work with again. Most commonly, people were accessing inclusion visions for opiate misuse, and the second most common reason for using the service was alcohol misuse. As I mentioned previously, we do have a significant number of people with co-occurring conditions, and these are particularly complex cases that are seen by the service. So we've seen a decline in the number of people who've been accessing the treatment service since 2015-16. So you can see the numbers have more than halved, and the numbers of referrals have also more than halved. The assessment wasn't able to identify why that was the case. I've spoken directly with Inclusion Visions. The suspicion is that this is down to the increasing complexity of cases and individuals not necessarily being referred into the service or not being able to access the service. So that is, we're not on the recommendations yet, but that is certainly one of the key recommendations, is that when we recommission this contract, we are able to reach far more of these individuals with complex cases. So treatment numbers, successful completions were pretty good. The service has met its target over the last 3 years for opiates. There's a bit more variability in the completion rates for other substance types, but from recent performance meetings that I've been involved with, the service generally meets its performance indicators. But it is restricted by the current scope of its own service contract. So it's not contracted to perform assertive outreach. So we do struggle to engage with individuals who don't necessarily want to engage with the service. And that, again, is something that we will look at for 24-25 onwards. And we do have a problem with individuals moving between the young person service, so that's the Wise Up service run by CGL. When individuals reach an age where they would transition into the adult service, there is evidence that individuals do get lost, and those are particularly vulnerable individuals. So again, we have some work ongoing at the moment to try and plug that gap. But again, when we recommission in 24-25, that will definitely be something we'll capture in the scope. So there's a lot of recommendations in the report. I think there's around 20, but they can be grouped by strategy, partnership working, service development, service users, and information and evaluation. I've just tried to capture a few of these here. So we need to make sure we work with the Combating Drugs Partnership, which is a new mandatory executive group that is mandated by national policy, and that basically is an extension of the Community Safety Partnership, but also with stakeholders who have an interest in substance misuse. So that includes a lot of the individuals I mentioned previously who were interviewed for this assessment, but it's basically the CSP plus housing, public health, YOS, that sort of thing. So we have to have a combating drugs partnership, and that will shape the local delivery of the national drug strategy. Whether we have a local strategy is yet to be decided, but we need to have some kind of local delivery of the national strategy. So when the current contract ends, we want to recommission a system levels drug and alcohol service, and that's in line with the human learning systems approach. The Thurrock Mental Health Transformation Board, so we're looking at working here on a whole systems approach. We need to work more closely with the Thurrock Mental Health Transformation Board and with adult mental health services, housing, homeless service, and substance misuse service. So there's a lot more joined up working, basically, is what we're saying here. We need to carry out a lot more joined up working, appreciating that we have a huge number of complex cases. And the final recommendation that I've just captured there should be some suicide awareness training that should be carried out with all individuals across all agencies who are involved in substance misuse work. So if we get the final nod today, what will happen is the document will be published, made available publicly. We will start looking at who's going to take ownership of some of these recommendations. That has already started in essence, but we will do that in a more formal sense. We will then we will then basically start the recommissioning process. So we have a timeline of around 12 months, working backwards from April 24. So if we can start that process in February, March, we'll be in a good place to get a new, improved, refreshed, robust, evidence-based service in place for 24-25. I've rattled through that, but I'm happy to take any questions, and I'll do my best to answer those.
Thank you for your report, and I really do thank you for your report. This is a brilliant piece of work. The work that's gone into this, the detail that has gone into this is to be commended. For me, it's come at a perfect time. During HOS, we've been asking for some more information on the alcohol use within Thurrock. As we know, it just isn't the mental health side that alcohol can play, the physical health as well. I know with A&E departments at weekends and all that, they have their fair share of alcohol-related problems. I know in the detail you do speak about the manpower that's lost and the times of work that's lost through alcohol misuse. I'm just going to quickly go through. I've got like 19 points that I was going to go through. I'm going to try and cut them down because I think Councillor Pofko is going to be banging her head on the desk. So. Okay, so there's an estimated 1,600 adults. So that's basically 1 in 100 of our population is alcohol dependent, which is quite a wake-up call, really, when you think about it. You know, if you're on a bus or a train, you've got a chance to be with someone that is suffering from this problem. And, you know, it's a lot more common than what people really do understand regarding it. Then we went on to the needs assessments. People misusing alcohol and drugs often have other difficulties in their life, such as mental health conditions, problem with housing, and engaged in crime. Are we only focused on the people we know about? Obviously, there's a lot of people out there that misuse substances that are still very active. They still go to work every day. They still may have high-powered jobs. They may work in the city. Are we covering that area as well?
So the service does have an education element to it. So there is work done around promoting healthy activity, what would be safe levels of consumption, that sort of stuff. So those individuals would not be in treatment as such, but there is still a focus from the service in doing that. The Inclusion Visions isn't entirely focused on structured treatment. They do what we would probably call health promotion activities. So I would hope that they would still be captured, those individuals, by the current service.
Okay, thank you. The next one is on page 173. Unfortunately, the 4 integrated medical centres are, so this is obviously written with 4 integrated medical centres in mind. This is going to be used heavily within our capture and treatment. As I say, with Rita sitting here, the NHS obviously making contingency plans if this does not happen. Are we going to start doing that now, in case this doesn't happen? Can we look at making sure that this is still rolled out into the PCNs, something like that, so we don't lose that connection? Yep.
Yeah,
so I think. Oh, sorry.
Yes, God.
Shall I answer that one?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I think that, the service works well at the moment. The concept of integrated into or being located in the IMCs is obviously to improve the service. So if there isn't a concern that the service is not up to scratch at the moment and the IMCs will bring it up to speed, it's more that would be better. So we can certainly look at what we've heard tonight about the IMCs will mean for that service back in 24-25. There'll be a degree of who's bidding for this contract and what are they looking to deliver and how much of that will they want to do on their own premises. So there's a bit of unknown here really about what the future holds, because we haven't started the recommissioning process yet. I know the service is currently in Corringham IMC, and they're making use of that a couple of days a week, I think, and that's working well. So we're aware that the IMC that we have does bring value. So if they're not going to be in place in a way that we thought they might be, then we would obviously look at what could we put in place instead. But I think we need to understand a bit better what is going to happen there.
Thank you. Yeah, just one point I just want to say is a bit of a shout out to police, actually. On page 181, you've got the crime records there, although we have an increase. I'm very much aware of the work that the police have been doing currently within Thurrock, with Raptor. It's been a brilliant piece of work. So I'd just like to shout out to them on that one. Now, on page 103, you do highlight one of my big concerns, and that the limited understanding between how teams work together. So, you know, you've got the IVT doing their part, and something that I do know from experience is working within mental health. When we have someone come to us with a drug or alcohol addiction, we can't always treat them the way we want to, because they're still under the influence, they're still addicted. We can't help them with their housing needs or things like that. And it highlights here that you recognise you need to work together, need to have this staff training to understand how each department works. I think that is a brilliant bit of advice that you've struck on upon there. It's really well identified. So, yeah, I don't want to say congratulations, it's just like patronising. But no, I just think it's a brilliant piece of advice that's been identified in the report. I feel that I'm taking up too much time. There was one on page 202 I just want to quickly go over, because I don't recognise that we actually have one in the area. Agreed lead joint commissioner of the authority of commission across the NHS, mental health services and local authority, public health, drugs and alcohol, tobacco service sectors. Do we have a joint lead? Is that you?
I didn't quite catch that, sorry, Councillor.
So it says the recommendation, or what we should be having, is agreed a lead or joint commissioner with authorities to commission across the NHS mental health service.
So no, we don't have that in place currently. That's a recommendation. It's probably one of the things we're going to have to look at as and when this report is approved, how we could implement that.
Yeah, I actually think it is a key recommendation that should really, because it wasn't actually on your recommendation sheet on the end. So I just wondered why that wasn't going to be pushed forward. But yeah, actually what I'm going to do, I've got loads more, but I'm going to move on to other councillors. Councillor Puffskerry, I do apologise, sorry.
That's okay. Thank you, Chair. All really good questions. Thank you for the report. I just want to echo Councillor Ralph's comments on what a good report it is. It's very thorough, it's very detailed, it's clearly evidence-based. It was long to read, but it was worth it. I have two questions, which I'm going to ask really, really quickly. So the first one is about the recommissioning. When we recommission the service, what will be the level of involvement of service users within that? Sort of hoping that they'd be at the centre of the recommissioning, but you can give me some more details, I'm sure. And the second was a question around the second bullet point on the key findings, on the second key findings page, which is around the success rate of treatment completions. And it says that the target is met for opiate treatment, or has been met from April 2019 to March 2022, but that there's much more variability for successful completion rates for the other substance types. I'm just wondering if we've got any kind of ideas about why that might be. Is it a difference in the service, or is it a difference between something to do with the demographics or the particular circumstances of opiate, people who are trying to come off opiates as opposed to other substances? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillors. I'll take the second question first. I think it's probably down to the complexity of cases. If it's purely an opiate issue, then I think inclusion visions are comfortable dealing with that, tried and tested approach to that. I think once you get the combination, the complex cases, they're more difficult to have a successful completion. It's something we have discussed in our performance meetings, and it's something we're keen to get on top of, because we want people to have the best possible outcomes, of course, no matter how many different conditions they have. So yeah, I think it's complexity really. It will just be a combination of various factors, make it very difficult to complete the treatment successfully. But we are cognizant of that, and we are thinking about what we can do, and not waiting until 24-25 to get on top of that, but working with Inclusive Visions over the next 15 months to try and improve the outcomes there. Service users, the service users have individuals who access the service they've been captured in this needs assessment, so we feel we've got a steer. I mean, the feedback from them was generally quite positive, but I think we could probably probe a bit more there as we do the service specification for the retendering process. I think we could possibly go back and dig a little bit deeper, get a bit more nuance from them. And I think because it's a human learning systems approach, it's going to be an ongoing dialogue. We don't want to just commission a 10 or 15 year contract based on what people have told us in 2023 and run with that. We will have an evolving contract that will be in the service specification, that we must maintain a sort of fluid approach to how we deliver this service. And that will be based very much on outcomes, but also on the perspectives, the lived experience of people who are accessing the service.
Thank you.
Again, I think we've noted and commented on it. I will say I was very interested in the dropout level of service, and it's very, very disappointing when someone does drop out. I know that the staff that are working with those people almost take it personally. They feel like they've failed, but I want them to focus on the success that they've had. It's a really good success rate that they're hitting. And they should be encouraged by that. It's a very difficult thing that they are doing. So I just want to just say that we all try to do this to make an impact and a positive step on people's lives. I loved reading the report at 3 o'clock in the morning, sitting there going through, because it was so long. It's very detailed. I love all the stats and figures in it. I've gone through it many times. It's a piece of work that I think we will keep on record, because it gives us a big database we can pull from to see where we can improve other things in the area. It's got so much stats in there about what drugs are being used and everything. It's been a great piece of work, and it's truly noted and commented on. So thank you again. Thank you for that report.
Thank you.
And now I've lost where I am. It's getting late. Right, we are now on item 10, the active travel plan needs assessment. Is it Joanne Ferry or Joe? What one?
It's me. I'm presenting this one.
Okay, I've got Joe Broadbent presenting. Thank you.
Thanks. So yes, another long report from the public health team. We have been busy, and you'll note that this is a very different type of needs assessment from the previous two, which were looking at how to support the needs of individuals with particular health needs. This is looking at the question of active travel and what needs within the borough an approach to active travel could address. I just want to say we've got Nav Tung from the transport team here. Thank you, Nav, for joining the meeting, because the response to this needs assessment will be very cross-cutting across departments. The transport team are obviously going to be absolutely key to addressing this, but action also needs to be taken in terms of leadership, setting the vision, the cross-working with the local plan design principles. So it's a very much a cross-cutting topic is active travel. This piece of work was done again about 9 months ago, so I'm sure that Nav will be able to update on the policy work that's been done since this report was completed. But I'll go through the what the needs assessment says and just give you a quick overview of that. So active travel, why is active travel important? Well, it has a range of benefits from the individual up to the macroeconomic. Active travel promotes mental and physical health benefits for individuals, creates a fitter and healthier population, also promotes emotional well-being through activity, which ultimately saves the NHS and health and social care costs down the line. Active travel also has an impact on the quality of our public.
Sorry, Joe, we've lost you for some reason. Have you? I think she might have frozen.
Is it us or is it Joe? Can anyone else hear us? Can anyone else hear us at all?
Is Nav on as well?
No.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, they can hear us. So I think Joe has just froze. Again, I do apologise for this. This is a...
That's because you extended
Extended, yeah.
the meeting.
I'm guessing Nav can't take over the presentation.
I was going to say, I was just going to see if I can. They have sent it to me, but it's not something I've.
Joe's back. Joe's back.
Can you hear me now?
We can do, yes.
Oh, okay, good. Sorry, I think that might have been my Wi-Fi. I'm not entirely sure what happened. I'm not sure where you lost me. Sorry?
Did you think
Stronger
you finished?
economy.
You just carrying on going.
So I think I was saying that Thurrock is obviously a very congested road network. Anyone who's driven around Thurrock will have noticed that, and this is probably going to get worse with the economic growth plans that we have, with the population increase and developments such as the Lower Thames crossing. Obviously, the response to increasing congestion is multifaceted and involves a number of aspects such as public transport links, etc. But active travel does have a key role to play in this, particularly in terms of those shorter distances travelled within the borough. There's a high number of journeys under a mile that are taken by car, but could be with improved infrastructure and environment, for example, walked or cycled. And ultimately, all this can feeds into a stronger economy. Improved quality of life, improved environment encourages people to want to live in the borough. Our backing Thurrock economic growth strategy envisages increased economic growth, increased skill base of the employment sector within Thurrock. And we want people to work and live in the borough, not work and commute back out of the borough. So there are myriad impacts from active travel. The national survey data from Department of Transport has shown that in Thurrock we have levels of walking have stayed fairly constant over recent years, and levels of walking are similar to our neighbouring areas, although lower than the England average. Conversely, though, when we look at the proportion of adults who regularly cycle, we have a very small proportion of adults who regularly cycle in Thurrock, only 1.2%, which is much lower than the England average of 4.4%, and much lower than what is possible if we look at Cambridgeshire, where there's clearly a high level of cycling and a concerted approach to promoting that and reducing congestion. For every pound spent on walking and cycling infrastructure, around £5.50 comes back into the economy across the various impacts of health, improved environment, reduced congestion and improved air quality. So there's a lot of capacity for us to benefit in Thurrock from improving active travel approaches. The needs assessment looks at the various factors for success, and we've sort of divided them into 3 sections. One is around policy. We have to have the right policy environment. One is around having the right infrastructure in place. And the third aspect is around people and culture. So in terms of policy, we need to have leadership. We need to have a vision. This won't be achieved unless we can articulate a vision of what it is we want out of improving active travel. The local walking and cycling infrastructure plan is an absolutely key document around this, and having one of those, it's not mandatory for a local authority to have one of these, but if a local authority does have one of these plans, it opens the door to a lot of investment for the infrastructure for walking and cycling. So that's a really key policy area for us to be working on. We also need to be thinking about the local plan, what the design principles are in the local plan, how they promote communities that foster walking and cycling and reduce the use of cars, particularly for those short journeys that I was mentioning. And planning conditions within the development management process are also important. In terms of place, we know that infrastructure and having the right infrastructure is really important. One of the barriers, there are multiple barriers to people being encouraged to walk and cycle, but safety, for example, is one that is often cited as a barrier to people cycling. If we don't have a robust cycle network, if cycle paths are not well separated from traffic, this can discourage people to cycle. So having that supportive infrastructure is really important. And the local plan aspects can consider, for example, things like the 20-minute neighbourhood. This is a concept whereby new developments should be encouraged to have the major amenities that the community requires to be within a 20-minute walk within the community, and this has been shown to encourage people to walk more and use the car less. So there's a lot we can do in terms of design principles and working with local communities on what they want. It's notable that the local plan, Your Place, Your Voice consultation discussed this with local residents, and I think 71% of the feedback from wards was that the communities in those areas really wanted to be able to walk and cycle more and wanted the infrastructure in place to support and encourage them to do that. So there is a willingness among our communities to walk and cycle more, to change that culture. We have quite a strong car culture in Thurrock, but communities are open to change. So addressing the barriers that there are to walking and cycling and changing people's behaviour has a real strong cultural aspect as well. So there's a number of recommendations in the report, and they are again aligned to the policy context, to supporting people, to changing that culture of car use, to engaging the community about how we do this and what the community wants in terms of walking and cycling. That's absolutely key. And then translating those community aspirations into impacts in our place, having the infrastructure, employing the 20-minute neighbourhood concept, working with not just communities but businesses to foster walking and cycling as well, and then exploring links with these big developments we've got. Oh, the IMCs are there again, but also the Thames Freeport, the Sea Park work that ASLA is doing, etc. These are all really key. This is a very cross-cutting concept. So what's happening now? So I said that the transport team are going to be absolutely key to this, and I'll let Nav just comment on what the transport team are doing. But that collaborative approach and ensuring active travel is embedded in strategies and policies across the council is really key. And we've brought this to the HOSC today to really ask for your support and advocacy from a health perspective in particular for active travel in terms of developing these policies and strategies that will be worked on across the council. So that's the transport strategy, the local plan, and then the more specific plans like the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan. So we'll be seeking support from the Health and Wellbeing Board as well. Having a cycling champion would also be supportive. So that's what we're asking you for today, your support for this agenda and your thoughts on how we can take this further forward. I don't know if you just want to comment, Nav, on some of the work that is going on in terms of taking this forward.
Thank you, Jo. There's an awful lot of work that the strategic transport team are undertaking. So So the overarching piece of work that we are doing is the delivery of a new transport strategy that is being developed as we speak. And the intention was to start some engagement in the coming weeks as part of the wider local plan engagement sessions. We think those are probably unlikely to happen, so we'll be looking at undertaking our own separate engagement with communities in the coming months. The council also will have to be developing a new local transport plan, which the Department for Transport are requiring, and that is something that we are trying to we haven't received the guidance yet in terms of differentiating between the transport structures that we are creating, which is really to support and underpin the work that is happening with the local plan, and then what are government's specific requirements. Within that is a whole host of sub documents, of which the walking and cycling plan, implementation plan is one of those that has been commissioned to be developed. Some preliminary work on that has already been undertaken, so we've already done an audit of all of the roads within the borough to see actually how cyclable they are. One of the most positive things out of that was actually the cyclability of Thurrock's roads were better than are perceived by many people. But it's about creating those last linking two routes together. And I think one thing that we lack is routes as opposed to the infrastructure, actually helping people to identify how they can get from A to B using active modes of travel. And then there is, since the pandemic, the government introduced new guidance around improving the infrastructure. So the old ability to just convert paths into shared paths is no longer appropriate. So if you are going to look at providing infrastructure for walking and cycling, it must be of a much higher quality, of higher standard, greater width, so that there isn't conflict between pedestrian vehicles and cyclists. And that is giving us opportunities to think about where we can deliver this. And all of that starts to come together through the walking and cycling implementation plan. We have got funding for a number of schemes. Most of these are in the east of the borough, but when we have that wider LC whip in place, that will help us create that longer term plan for borough wide, and actually give us that list of schemes that we can then seek funding and implement. Thank you.
Thank you, Nav. Yeah, so sometimes I do get confused where some of the information comes from. So we have the active travel plan that we've got coming up. You said the money has been spent in the east of the borough, or you've got plans coming up in the east of the borough. I do remember before COVID and after COVID, we were looking at extending the footpath from Stamford Hope to Basel Hospital along the old A13. It went through, and I know we was going to get there, and it got dropped. Now there is the cycle path is along there, but there's no footpath, and I know we have some nurses that do walk from Stamford Hope to Basel Hospital, where there is no footpath. So we're still fighting to get that done. When I look at the local area, it's great to hear that we've got quite a good road network for cyclability in Thurrock. It does worry me where we're going to be putting these new roads in, new cycle paths, where the roads have to be wider, or the cycle lanes have to be wider. It does narrow the road down that we have for vehicles. That can have a knock-on effect to other things like accidents and stuff like that. So it does take some working out. The other thing I'd like to highlight is that the school action plan. Now, hands up, I will admit that I'm a conflict of interest here. I am trying, or have been trying, to get a zebra crossing outside my local school, and it's been knocked back. And the details we're given, there needs to be 100 children's movements to 1,000 traffic movements. If you're trying to increase people walking and cycling, we need to start them young. And just by safeguarding them, by putting zebra crossings outside their schools, so they will walk to school, is really important. So if you want to start encouraging people to walk, then we need to have zebra crossings outside schools. Because where this money is being spent, I'm sure local residents will say, you know what, if you want to make the streets safer to walk and cycle on, put the zebra crossings outside the school and not spend it elsewhere. Because that's where it matters for the kids. Sorry for a bit of a rant. Does any other councillor wish to comment? Councillor Puffco.
Really quickly, because I'm aware of the time. Yeah, thank you for the report. I really appreciate that it's come. I really appreciate what it's trying to achieve. I think we haven't had a joined-up approach to anything like this for too long. And as you said, we've got a borough that really, really needs this type of work done. What does really, really concern me, and I'm really glad that the leader of the council joined us for this bit, is that in section 5.6, it says statutory duties for local authorities, sustainable modes of travel strategy for schools. Apparently, we have a statutory duty to produce what's called a SMOT. On page 57 of the report, it then goes on to say, this document has been identified as being, by local schools, as being a key strategic component to develop sustainable travel within their schools. So they're saying it's useful. However, the latest school sustainable modes of travel strategy for Thurrock, which ran from 2015 to 2018, is not currently being updated due to reallocation of transport funding to other areas, and consequently there is no strategic guidance in place, which seems like we are failing in a statutory duty. It certainly sounds like we're not giving schools the strategic guidance that they need, and possibly not giving actual departments on the ground the guidance that they need. I'd also say that it's interesting when we consider the proposed cuts to the bus for St Clair's School for children in East Tilbury, in the context of this report, doesn't make a lot of sense. What we're asking those children to do is walk along an unmade road, which is essentially a country lane, with a high speed limit to get to their school. Otherwise, they're going to have to get in a car. And we need some more joined up thinking. So I'm hoping that you guys are reaching out to education to say, look, this doesn't work with what we're trying to achieve here. You need to rethink.
Chair, can I come in and answer a whole host of those questions? Yes, right. So in terms of the SMOT strategy that Councillor Pothry has identified, so we have been working up a draft version to publish, and we've done a lot of work on that, working with schools. I think while we as an authority don't have an up-to-date published SMOT strategy, I think it'd be unfair to say that schools don't have that strategic lead from the council. So we have active engagement, or we offer active engagement with every single school in the borough through our road safety team, which sits under me. We provide a whole host of support for them in terms of cycle training, walking training at a very young age. So I think they do have access to that support. We also provide that support in terms of developing and writing their travel plans with them. And we have a target of increasing the number of schools that have school travel plans, which then helps them become more aware in terms of the ways they can increase sustainable travel to those schools. In terms of the St Clair's item that you've identified, we actually have commissioned a piece of work to help us identify how that route can be delivered, that provides that safe route that is free from conflicts with the traffic, and that also complies within education's requirements to do that. So that's been a collaborative work between our team and education. We've identified what a cost of that could be and are exploring opportunities in terms of how that could be delivered. There are a number of barriers to that, and the education team are aware that until that provision can be provided, you know, that ongoing support for travel to school will have to continue to be provided. In terms of some of the stuff Councillor Ralph identified, we do actually have that ambitious plan of active travel route that links Stamford all the way through to the borough boundary at 5 Bells and how to get through 5 Bells. which would then give us that link. That's was something that came out of COVID pandemic in terms of helping us identify actually there was this desire and need to do that. That will be delivered partly through funding from Department for Transport, where we have some funding to do linking the Manaway up Rookery Hill through into Corringham. And then furthermore, we are looking at funding through third-party developers to build the rest of that link through. But you have also identified one of the key conflicts we have in this borough at the very highest level, that is that Thurrock is car dominated, and there is a fear about the provision of these active travel infrastructure and the knock-on impact that will have on people who use their car. Yet at the very highest level of government, there is a belief that many of the journeys that are undertaken by car can be undertaken by walking and cycling and other modes that are sustainable, which in turn will have that positive impact on some of the fears you have around accidents that take place on the road network. And those are some of the barriers that we have to overcome and help people to understand that actually you are able to do this journey via these modes. We are looking at improving the infrastructure to help you to do that. But at the same time, we are facing the challenge from residents and members who sometimes fear the knock-on impact that will have on people who use their vehicles to travel.
Thank you for that. I'm aware that we've just gone over 10 o'clock. Does anyone have any? I've got Councillor Salmons. Yeah. Anyone else want an urgent question? Yeah. Okay, I'll go Councillor Salmons, then Councillor Polly.
Yeah, just to jump in on this active travel plan, I thought I'd been advised that the St Clair's buses were actually staying. So is that not the case now? Obviously, I am aware that quite soon now, new tenders will be going out for procurement for various school contracts. So are you now saying that the St Clair's route is now being looked at to be axed again?
No, what I said was that we are looking at how you can build the routes that can provide that safe travel for pupils to walk and cycle.
Yeah, because obviously at this point in time, there is no safe walking or cycling route for the majority of children in East Tilbury. And personally, having been here for nearly 40 years, I can't see any way of making a safe walking route. The roads are far too narrow. We have far too many vehicles. It would be a fair walk in the winter. So what is being suggested?
That, like I said, that work is being developed.
Okay. So basically, you're looking at a walk route somewhere?
Yes, a LTM 120 compliant active travel route.
Okay, because I think you'll find that a lot of the parents in East Tilbury will not send their children on that long walk to St Clair's. And I understand in the past it's been looked at that maybe they could walk across the fields if there was a footpath. Personally, I think that'd be highly dangerous. I don't think many parents would be happy with that. So we'd end up with a situation that we'd have double the amount of cars entering and exiting this area on an already horrendous road and rail network. I mean, we're already sitting here for 20 minutes most days trying to get out. So if all the parents suddenly decide that they're going to put their children in cars, Oh, it'd be absolutely a nightmare.
Thank you for that, Councillor. I echo
Okay.
your thoughts that I do have the thought of a child, maybe a straggler going to school late, walking across that long journey across a field somewhere. Even if it's a
Well,
purpose-built footpath, would be quite worrying in the safeguarding term.
exactly, and the lighting aspect.
Okay.
Personally, I think that'd be quite dangerous.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Polly.
I'm a little bit concerned that I don't find this report inclusive enough. There's no reference in here to like our older population who use the mobile scooters now. We've got electric bikes, electric scooters that I've got a concern. And I also, we're also thinking about, like, not all schools have got fully able children, or they'll have a mix of children, so you might be having children on trikes and that, so perhaps a child with cerebral palsy. I don't, and taking some of our earlier conversation about improving people's health and giving people with long-term health conditions the opportunity to self-manage their conditions. Yet there's nothing in here that says that people with reduced mobility could be included in these. So I don't know if how compliant this report is. That gives me a little bit of a concern. And I also have a memory, because I'm a returning councillor for those that don't know. We did have somebody in the civic offices many years ago from, and I can't remember the name of the organisation, Trans, who had a bicycle, and he was on a bicycle and he rode every inch of Thurrock, and that's why some of the bicycle paths we've got now were his instigation. But we've had things like the Two Faults walk that's never come to fruition. We're 17 miles of river frontage. This gets regurgitated over and over again about cycle paths from the west of the borough to the east of the borough. And again, they will be desired paths. There's no point in putting paths because there's a space to put a path. These will be desire paths. You need to go out and see where people are choosing to walk, where people are cycling. And so I'm not sure the approach is... Of all the reports this evening, this is the one that gives me most concern about its conception and about its actual deliverability. So that's my comments. Thank you, Chair.
Can I just come in on that, Chair? I think the comment about inclusivity and individuals with disabilities and differing abilities is probably quite well made. I don't think we've fully addressed that, and I think now that's maybe something we could pick up about how we build that into thinking around this in the future. The second point I was going to make, sorry, it's just gone completely out of my head.
Whilst you're doing that, I was going to say, under the new design guidance, there is a requirement to provide that walking and cycling infrastructure that is compliant for all users. That is creating one of the challenges we have around the required removal of some of the barriers that we have that prevent misuse of that infrastructure from people on quad bikes, motorcycles, etc., which is something that we need to overcome. But there is a general requirement at a central government level to actually see some of those things removed, so that this infrastructure becomes more accessible, more usable by others. I think as well with this infrastructure side of things, Councillor Polly picked up around the increasing use of e-scooters and whatnot, while they remain illegal, they are on the road and they're difficult to overcome. But if we can provide that dedicated cycle infrastructure, actually that will provide a space to prevent that conflict that there currently is with people who are misusing e-scooters, with pedestrians who aren't expecting them.
I think Councillor Apothecary's other comment about we need active travel routes that take people where they want to go is also very well made. It's about routes to schools, but it's also about routes to healthcare facilities, to shops, to the facilities that people need in their day-to-day lives, and not putting a path where it fits, putting a path where it's needed. I think I absolutely agree with you there, yeah.
Can I just add one comment before I bring on to Councillor Piccolo? Future-proofing our developments going forward. Going through the stats and figures from all the reports tonight, the increasing of the ageing population within Thurrock. Now, obviously, we'd like everyone to be healthy, but you know, as we get older, things don't always work the way they should be. I don't want to see reductions of buses and transport links, even if they are, you know, just 5 minutes up the road for people. We still need to have that. Now, we've got care homes, and I've got people in my care home, top of my road, that can't even walk to the top of the shop. You know, they're still dependent on taxis or the local minibus bloke who does a lot of free trips for them. So I still think that we need to keep that in our focus, that not everything can be based on someone jumping on a bike or walking. I say it does scare me, the thought of a child walking along this distance along through Tilbury to St Clair's on their own. That does scare me. Councillor Piccolo.
Yeah, just quickly. It's what to do about the car use. I mean, we've got fantastic transport links between Thurrock and Southend and Thurrock and London. You want to go anywhere else, the local transport policy is what that leads to is people have a car and they need a car because they want to go to a place like Brentford, Harlow, where there isn't easy transport unless you go into London to pick up a connection. Those people, if they didn't need to go that way, they wouldn't necessarily be using the car. They've got the car because they need to travel that way. So therefore, if it's sitting in the front garden, they tend to use it to go down the local shops or to go down there, wherever they're going, where they could use bus or walk. So until we find some way of making easier connectivity between Thurrock and, what would it be, west of the borough, Brentwood and that sort of area, you're going to have, to my mind, you're going to always have this problem because people can't access it easily with public transport.
Thank you, councillors. Is there anyone else?
No, that's it.
No? Okay, so we need to wrap this up for tonight. Well, so just before I pass on the comment of this report, I will go back to the school travel plans with mode shifts. I know with a lot of schools locally jumped on board and done the mode shifts stuff, and they've got their own community champions for within their school, what are they called? Safety officers. They've got children for safety officers. I think working with the local schools and understanding their needs would be really advisable. I do miss our engagement with the local schools for all the services that we provide. Getting the school kids in, I know our mayor has them in the chamber sometimes for, and we have the youth council as well. I think they're great input to have into this sort of report. Their views of their future within our boundaries and within our borough. On that note, we're asked to, was this to the recommendations? Is it just to note?
Yeah, just to note.
I think we've made our comments on it and it's not always been positive. So, yeah. But I do thank you for the report. Again, I found it very interesting and very in-depth. Again, thank you. The work programme, it was, we're moving item 11, which is the Cabinet Portfolio of Members Adults report, to the next committee. And we did say about asking input back. Sure. So declare there's been new year. Brilliant, thank you all. And at 19 minutes past 10, I declare the meeting closed. Thank you.